anything that correlate with what Corey had recommended if you do asset testing, it shouldn't exceed that.
Fine with that. So about $500,000.
Well, it
Well,
would vary on the
it could
property.
be 250 or it could be 850.
And most of them are
Right,
close to 500.
Most of them are right around there.
One neighborhood is
Yeah.
500, you know, 350.
And then
325, I don't think we're gonna
Sold in by County Commons there. That was deed restricted lottery that
Yeah.
just sold. That was under 2.
get some kind of.
That's like the lowest thing
Yeah.
out there in existence. So Marlon, what do you say?
Well, I think, real quickly, Katie, is there a reason why we're holding off in the discussion of including property?
no, I can skip to that too.
Well, because I think, to me, I think that fits into
Yeah.
the whole picture. I don't think they should be divided.
And I think it's like that with all.
Theoretically, it's listed that way, I think, in the covenant today, as you can't other assets under properties.
Because I do.
That.
And it's not enforceable either there because other people do own the properties.
So why should we be doing?
Well, maybe to curb it, maybe to slow it down, maybe they think a little bit more about it and go, hey, I have 2 houses and I'm trying to get into a deed restricted, or I have the 5 million and I'm trying to get into, because there are those people, you know, and, I don't know, I think they both go together. But I would say, why people who live in there now, most of them don't have enough property, or some people that do, you know,
Well, they're
Yeah.
for sure.
you know, so.
For sure.
You know, yeah. We had somebody presenting to us who was in that situation, you know, and like, so.
Yeah,
I don't know, you're
well, it's gonna be like everything.
You're gonna kick
You
them out?
You gonna kick them out because they don't work here?
No, like we're not, right?
Yeah.
That's not part of our.
Yeah.
Our policy that way.
I think it's just to deter.
What's that? That we don't kick people out,
That
that
we
we don't
don't-
enforce somewhat.
That we won't kick somebody out based on asset limitations at the very least. Like, so say you own in one of our deed restricted units and then you ended up with a property that your parents left you or something,
Right.
right? We're not gonna kick them out because they have this other property somewhere else.
We had this happen where we had a gentleman who decided to move to another state. In his monitoring, he said, I own property in Washington and I don't wanna live in it, but he didn't wanna sell it. He was renting his deed restricted unit in the town. Because we owned a second, the way our covenant language in that covenant was written. He owned it, he would not
And
allow.
you were not supposed to own
You could
other,
not own
and
it.
he gave that up himself. It
Correct.
wasn't
We
like,
didn't, we didn't know
we
what,
had done it,
yeah.
right, you know, that's
He
different.
would sell his library.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah.
Since he's moving out of town and choosing to tell us that he's gonna move out of town instead of still being in town, and one of those things like, we're not. We're not. As far as I understand.
We are not actively seeking information about it to enforce. Right? Got it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
But if it comes up in a yearly monitoring, we may have to enforce on it.
We never have at this point, right?
Except
Except for the one who came forward and did it himself.
I guess I'm not sure what,
Are we enforcing, the no asset limitation rule as it is?
no second ownership.
Yeah.
If you own a deed restricted property in the town of Frisco, when you get your monitoring, either you're lying and saying you don't have another property for that deed restricted unit, or you are saying I have another property, and then we're looking at what your covenant says, and if your covenant says you can't, then we are enforcing your covenant.
And then you're forcing them to sell essentially
Yeah.
at that point.
We had.
Was that only another property in Frisco or was that another property in just?
We only deed monitor on properties that are in the town of Frisco.
He's asking what the second property.
The second property that.
Oh,
It doesn't
was,
matter
no,
where
it was
it
in
is.
another state, it was in the state of
In
Washington,
another state?
in that case.
Okay, well, so all that said, I am not for asset limitations. I think this is hindering people's ability for mobility. period. And I'm not gonna worry so much about the one or two who have enough money or trying to break in, you know, compared to holding people back, because at this point, I think we are holding people back that way. From mobility.
Who would we be holding, who would we be holding
Yeah.
back?
How would
Who would
you,
we
if
be
the person
holding
had the money, why are we thinking
I
we're
guess it all
holding it back?
matters, like the level of,
Have the money, they
We're saying we're gonna kick you out of your place if you end up with another property somewhere in the country.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and if it shows up next year, then you have to sell your property.
you know, there for sure. I was thinking more in lines of qualifying.
Well, and that's why I think they're two different topics.
Well, but that's where it's like, if it's a yearly thing, it's gonna come up, it's not only on buy the place in the first place. You know, it's then the next year, when your parents died and left you a property, and all of a sudden, then we are hindering people from mobility, because then it's like, you're forced to sell that other property, or you could stay, you know, to stay in your place.
Katie, can you
You know,
go to
I'm absolutely
One
not for
fire.
that.
It's fine.
the one with the, which one's, okay, yeah.
That's why I went. So I understood.
That's
what your
fair, yeah,
position was.
So
Yeah.
are these for both qualifying and possession?
This is only for qualifying. The part about owning property is a separate, because right now we don't have anything for asset. So what we have is owning other property, and I get that as an asset, but it's, you can't own another property when you're buying it, and you can't own another property, so in our current covenant, when you live in the dealership.
And are we looking to not divide that against current units?
Well, that's why I
It
was
would
saying.
be two clauses, because there is a difference. One, assets could be treated one way, and that assets are only looked at when you purchase, as an initial purchase, because no one is penalized if they get income increases, and no one's, if they get a bank account that gets a higher savings once they're in. The second, home ownership, owning a second property, is always enforced the way it normally is for jurisdictions. So I think to where Andy's saying, and this is a good point that he made, I think, is, let's say somebody inherited a property out of state from their family. When we did monitoring, that they'd be required to sell that unit because they can't own it. But they could sell it and be okay with all the money because they already live in it. So you can have money but not property, or you could have money and property. The conversation with council on second ownership, when we had this discussion a few months ago, leaned towards people should be able to have whatever assets they want, and also other property. And again, looking for new direction or same direction from council now with this different makeup, but last time it was, how come you don't ban a Sprinter van? So why would you ban a cab in Minnesota? And that was a conversation we heard at a council meeting to keep in mind. So they are kind of connected, but they're also looked at a little differently, because assets are not looked at, with the exception of you can't own another property after you.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm torn between that difference between qualifying and possession. I think qualifying, because, you know, we have a very finite, you know, supply here. And so we really want to get the most out of that for the people who are really trying to get footprint in the community. I don't think, like, but then after that, to kind of really prevent wealth acquisition, you know, ability to accrue wealth, whether even if it wasn't given to them by their family, let's say they saved enough money to buy a condo in Florida. It kind of sounds like indentured servitude to me a little bit when you're preventing, you're like saying, we want you to stay more, or not, we want you to stay in that.
That's how we're hindering people.
Yeah, that's,
It's hindering them from mobility,
yeah.
from the ability for mobility.
That's why we're going through all these. If the council agrees that they want to allow you to own other property, whether it's all the time or just after purchase, that's why I put that in, because right now you can't.
Because during monitoring, we are checking for their annual salary.
No,
We're
we do not look at income.
we don't look at income.
No, because you can change your AMI once you're in the house.
That's my point.
Right.
I
We're
think
looking,
we're not
we're
looking to
primarily looking to
people
make sure
on the
you're working and providing services within the county.
Gotcha.
And we're looking to see if there's, some covenants have other requirements, but primarily that, do you have a renter and is your renter qualified? And, another one. So employment, location of your household, renting, and other property tend to be the main ones that we're looking
I think it's hard to say within reason because that could be different things for different people. I agree, the cabin in Minnesota or a second, I want to encourage people to grow financially. But if we have somebody who has become a real estate, you know, owns multiple properties in Denver and is renting them all, I think multiple properties, and it's hard to put a value on that, whether it's two $400,000 properties or it's the, $800,000. I think we need to figure it out, but I don't think we should have somebody in our deed restricted stock that owns multiple homes elsewhere, is renting them, that is their sole income. I think it's one thing if you inherit the family home or you have a cabin somewhere that is your vacation property. I think we should encourage that. We should encourage building wealth in our community, but I don't think it's appropriate that we have somebody in a deed restricted home if they own multiple properties.
But if they do change their job and they do become kind of a real estate operative and a rental operative, it's a legitimate profession. They're living here, they're paying their taxes, they're spending their money, but they've gone from, like, say, working for Breckenridge Resort to working for themselves. We want to hinder that just because the idea that their business is connected to property outside.
It's supposed to be working in the town there, buddy.
at. And that's
They
gonna
are.
be.
So yeah, you start your own business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, let's say they're
Working in
right
the town.
in the state of Colorado. They live here. Everything they do is here.
And we'll look for that with the employment, because currently you're supposed to be serving in Summit County. And so, similar to realtors, plumbers, dog walkers, they all are supposed to give us during monitoring evidence that they're working within the county. So
They're
it's
providing
supposed to be.
its counties.
And yes, now I will be completely honest, there is many people who don't, and we know it, and they're monitoring, they say they do, and we're not going saying you lied or we think differently, like, we're taking people's deed monitoring, so we have never enforced anybody, because no one on their deed monitoring has ever said, I work outside of this county. But by the technical definition, that is a topic we have for you guys at a meeting, so.
That's another argument.
Well, look,
Yeah.
That's gonna be.
And then it's, what you kick them out for?
well, look, I can definitely.
So there's one that you're gonna kick them out for, and this one you're not gonna kick them out for, and this one you're not gonna, but this one you are.
You're right. And I'm-
And what,
Pick and choosing.
what about, you can also, put your property in a trust. And
Yeah,
it's not,
then there's not.
you
They're
know,
hiding.
so like,
Just think people that savvy, it would be so, I think it's so unlikely that those people are trying, and again, unlikely.
you would think, and yes, maybe there has been one or two or whatever, we had a council member who went from deed restricted to non-deed restricted, and that's not because we were just, having a good year. These are things we've all done and we work towards it. So, do
So I
we
think-
want asset limitations or not?
Well, since I was sitting on the, since I was the one who was kind of floating between both, I mean, without question, my pretzel logic will allow the complication of this to an nth degree. So really, based on what you kind of just said, I actually will go with the mayor pro temp over there and call for no asset. Or requirement.
Okay, so that right there, I think is 3 if we agree.
I don't think we called the question.
We don't have to do a question for work session, but we have 3 on the opinion.
I don't think we really heard. You're assuming.
No, I'm not assuming. How about let's go around the table. Asset limitations
That's a
or not?
limitation.
I would certainly agree that some asset limitations should be in place.
Okay, Robin?
I am leaning towards no asset limitations, but if we do asset limitations, at the very least, the entire value of the property.
Okay, but wait, the first choice was no asset limitations?
Yes, I
We'll
would
do that in
prefer,
both.
I would prefer no asset limitation.
Okay,
If we do,
that's fine. If we go there, Dan,
Asset limitations.
okay,
It's
Martin.
not broad, it isn't, you sit there and actually have to pick one, I would go with no asset.
I am a no asset limitations myself.
And just as a reminder, all this famous last meeting, the topics that we came to, I know there was we did through on a lot of them. All you're gonna see as we go through this is a draft redlined of the direction we were given by the majority of council members, and it's all gonna be up for discussion, and then it's gonna go to legal to review, and then it's gonna go to the public to come back.
And we're still talking.
That's my wish, yes.
Yep.
And I do agree, and I know you all know this, it's frustrating to go topic by topic, because it really is tough until you get to see one document with everything, because all of a sudden you may start realizing certain things differently when you put it all together.
Yeah, because there's gonna be interplay between these different
Completely.
things, right?
So if we do this, then
Yep.
absolutely going to affect the next two choices we're making. So,
You wanna do ownership of property next? Kind of started it.
sure, we could do ownership of property next, I guess. We kind of.
Seems like it would be the same. But I would like to see if you have any difference.
I don't know. Weighing it all on your take on how easy or hard it is to actually monitor property ownership outside of Colorado. And then sort of putting you on the spot. I've heard it's difficult, and I don't.
If you're talking about on a statewide basis, it's not really any easier than finding somebody's bank account and how much is in it, right? I mean, you have to go to every county and work the title. That's hard.
So similar. Okay, so similar. It's difficult.
Database on a statewide basis, determining property ownership in the state, that I'm aware.
And I didn't put much notes in this. I did put in the staff memo an example of another one, just to be a little bit more, if you want to restrict ownership. I do like that some other, and I think this came from the Dillon Valley Vistas. I'm not leaning towards this one. This is an example of another entity that seems like it is a lot easier to enforce than our current one. So if you wanted to limit ownership in another property, this is being provided as an example of what staff would recommend you went with more different language than what we have today. That honestly, from staff's perspective, and we haven't heard from the housing authority on this, I think this one is very much along the line of assets where it's difficult to find, you have to really trust people. And then I do think Zach had a really good idea. Maybe there's a way to limit making it okay to own one property after you move in that you can earn and have based on versus multiple properties. I don't know. That seems like that was kind of your thought, which makes sense.
And I truly agree with you, Andy, like if you start a legitimate business, and you are owning properties that are for rent, that is good. I'm not here to try and hinder anybody's growth financially. But if you're in the position to own multiple non-deed restricted units and that is your income, I don't know that those are the people that should be in our workforce housing. That is my personal perspective.
And a couple of times, just to keep in your head on this discussion that it came up, we had a complaint on another, from one deed restricted owner on another one that they owned other properties, so we did research that one. That situation was where somebody had a mother who owned property in Colorado in the Front Range. They didn't feel like their mother was medically capable of having the ownership of the house, so they had transferred that house into their name. Their neighbor they didn't get along with their neighbor up here. Their neighbor reported them for being in violation because they owned another property. We didn't kick them out because she provided us medical evidence of what it was very difficult for staff to say, wow, you own another property, we're kicking you out. It was you had an elderly parent who needs your name on a mortgage to help with things. We didn't feel comfortable with staff going at a true violation because of the circumstances that we provided. So you do get situations like that. Then you get situations where people wanna own property with family in another state, and we have had to say no when they've been trying to buy, we've denied people for that. And then we have the argument of, that I mentioned, how come you can have whatever you want of a fancy camper or a Sprinter van, what's the difference between that and a small camper? And so those are just things to keep in mind. That's why staff personally, like, I don't know what you would do with this one, except probably lean towards kind of the same as asset. When staff said, we probably recommended not having one, but we see why you'd also look at it. So,
I would say if you had a van that had a mortgage on it, that would be the way to deal with it. I'm not for property limitations that way either.
I'm against spare vans.
Just in general.
I'm not.
I'm just generally, I see people living over there and I can't, my car's 2001.
Because you're
Purchasing a deed restricted, you have a brand new Sprinter van.
It's because you have a market value, mortgage isn't as high.
So,
Go ahead, Rob.
Hear more about your thoughts.
I am here to get people who've been working in this town for a long time into a house and out of rentals. I'm not here for a person moving here 1 or 2 years, getting into one of our deed restricted, as many houses, you might be, but I'm here to get people who've been living here into workforce housing. Okay, that's what I'm here for. I don't know what you guys are here for,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm here
Right, I am here for a very similar reason, but the thing is I feel that what we've laid on other people has hindered them the ability to have mobility. So it's like, I wanna get somebody from rental into ownership, but I don't wanna chain them there to that for the next 20 years and let them not do anything because they're making more money or because they bought
for. I
another
think we're
property.
asking
or because-
before.
No,
Well, this is
no,
before.
Dan, I'm not disagreeing with you. The thing
Yeah.
is, I am here for the long time local as well.
Yeah.
But the thing is these things right here are hindering the long time locals. That's what I believe. So, I don't disagree. We just don't agree on this,
I also think you
this
did
particular thing.
two different things.
Yeah.
I'm picking that up correctly.
Yeah. Because this is, you're saying you don't wanna hit the mobility of moving up, so we're not saying that they can't buy another property. We're saying that they shouldn't come here and own 4 properties and get a deed restricted house. We are saying that they can't have $500,000 in the bank and get here,
Yes,
and buy a house.
yeah,
You're saying that if they get the $500,000 after, we're not saying that. I'm not saying that.
I guess,
actually, no, that is actually entirely what we were saying. Because it was per year, we would be checking up on these things and deciding whether or not
And
they
the
still
town can
qualify
take,
and laying that on staff.
That's what
You
they're
know,
calling deed restriction.
Yeah. So, okay, if you guys wanna lay it out where there's gonna be limitations only on the purchase side and nobody's ever gonna force anything beyond that, then that's your choice. I'm telling you where I'm standing, and I know you don't like where I'm standing,
Yeah.
but like, that's too bad, because this is where I am. I feel pretty strongly about it, and I'm a hell of a lot invested into all of this information, and so like, yeah, that's just where we're at. So again, we still have to get to the point of, can you own other residential property anywhere in Colorado or in the United States or worldwide?
I guess I am looking for a little bit of your perspective here on if an individual owns multiple properties, not the cabin in Minnesota or the family house they inherited, but if an individual owns multiple properties, whether it's in Colorado or elsewhere, why you believe they should be eligible for workforce housing? Because there's obviously a sense of wealth with owning property, and they can make decisions whether they want to be in market rate or not. But they are capable, if they own multiple other properties, of being in the retail market. So I'm just looking for insight
Yeah.
from your perspective.
I would say in most cases, anybody with that kind of wealth behind them is never, ever going to buy a deed restricted property.
some of the wealthiest people are the cheapest people. But that's how they create
You know,
wealth,
okay.
you know?
The bottom line is if.
Larry Gold was a deed restricted
I'm
unit.
telling you,
That's the
Right.
point.
where I'm coming from
Yeah.
is that if I had the choice and I was coming into it with 4 other properties of $500,000 in the bank, you can have your deed restricted all day long and I'm gonna buy a market value unit because it's gonna make me more money. That's the bottom line. So I am not here to just provide the person who came here for a year or two with all of these other assets to try to steal one of our, workforce housing units. I am telling you that the decisions we are making have other ramifications beyond this one person who's coming in here, who's wealthy, who is a remote worker and whatever else, compared to what we're doing to the people who live under these restrictions now.
I
That's what I'm
think,
saying.
one thing for sure, Kimmy, that I've known you for a long time. Known Andy for a while, Bill and Steve, Zach, and Robbie, but I don't think anyone on this council is trying to do anything but get buildings in the house.
Yeah, that's the case, but we're coming at it from different angles and we have
different angles.
different opinions on it. Which is important, but we still have to come to, an agreement, at least 3 of us do, on what we're trying to do.
I
So,
mean, if we could have parsed this down, I mean, me and Robin were having the same trouble. We could have parsed this down into 8 different, subparagraphs of our decision, I think we would have. But at some point, we do just have to make that decision one way or the other, the way it's being worded to us right now.
Or we'll
yeah.
go back to the
Or-
original question of not changing.
Yeah,
That was right.
What?
Do you even want to have a standard new covenant?
That's what I thought the question was. I'm personally saying no. I'm saying no limitations because I don't believe that it's opening the door for the wealthy people to steal our workforce housing as much as I believe it's hindering those who are in workforce housing or trying to
TBT approach.
From growing wealth themselves. That's where I'm at.
So this is
I get how it can be abused.
the couple issues. Was Larry Feldman living in this deed restricted unit in Riverbend way back in the day? And then Tony Siebert was building these down at the end of Main Street here, and he wanted to retire and live in his
One of
deed
those.
restricted unit,
Right.
So there's rich people, he didn't have many assets because he got rid of everything and then, but he didn't work here for 7 years or something, he couldn't get in.
Sure.
So, but this is rich people that are trying to get into a
Absolutely.
deed restricted unit.
Right, but then we also
And
have
quickly, they-
not rich people
Quickly.
trying to get out of deed restricted units.
Then he quick claimed the deed.
What's that?
Uh,
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Which one, Larry?
What is it? What does that mean?
It means he had sold it to somebody with a quitclaim deed or not going through a covenant.
So the buyer was not eligible.
Well, they're renting it to somebody else, well, luckily, but they bought it for a lot more than they're gonna be able to sell.
There are cracks.
Yeah. The one thing is you're not gonna fill all the cracks.
And I don't think we can enforce a lot of this, but, and Andy, I do see your point of, good faith. Most of these people that have tremendous wealth probably aren't going to deed restriction because it's not the most financially responsible or lucrative way to do it. But I think having something in the covenant about a ridiculous amount of assets, whether that is property or liquid assets, I don't think it hurts to have it in there to encourage people acting in good faith.
So would you keep the asset level then at the value of the deed restricted? Or would you have to, at some point, you have to put a number out there?
I think property should be,
Yeah, this is
Potentially more.
property, not assets, because we already did assets.
we already considered assets, I shared my opinion there, I think
Yeah.
that should be at the value of the home, liquid assets. I think when we're talking about property, obviously the family home in a different state that you inherited. I don't think somebody should have the ability to have multiple properties, whether Colorado or elsewhere, and be living in workforce housing. If they are not living there, if it is not the family, so again, the family home that you inherit, that's great. I wanna go back to my grandparents' house and be able to have family reunions. But if I have my grandparents' house and 2 other properties, I don't think that I should be eligible to live in workforce housing. That is my perspective.
I personally don't think you should be able to too, philosophically, but I also think you start to really get into some exponential variables there that constantly have to be looked at and checked, rechecked, verified. I don't know, is that correct? Is that all that would have to be verified?
Depending on where you live.
You would just hope they'd be honest.
To that point, yeah,
You
it's
wouldn't
an
be-
affidavit.
Yeah, it's,
So-
you know, it's no way every year you're gonna be checking it.
I don't put a lot of value in those.
Yeah.
I just don't.
The way that I see it, real estate in this day and age is a really important part of people building their own financial wealth and sustainability long term. And what we're doing with the deed restricted housing is amazing, and it does not provide that increase in financial wealth. So I do think it's important for people to be able to have the opportunity to have some sort of investment outside of Summit County. You know, a lot of people who own a deed restricted house might be able to buy a $150,000 condo in Denver, but they cannot and probably will not for many, many years be able to buy anything in Summit County. So I think that's kind of where I'm playing with this idea in my head. Do we want people to be able to build their wealth? And does that necessarily have to coincide with them living and working and contributing to this community? So I want people to be able to own property. I still don't know what that looks like, whether that's outside of Summit County, outside of Colorado, how many properties. Definitely, you know, if you get to the point where you're owning, you know, more than 10 properties, like that's probably like a job that is outside of this county. I don't really know, I'm not the expert on that. But I don't know what that looks like. I think it's important because like you said, Andy, we're kind of holding them down and keeping them down, and I don't love that.
It's why we don't have churn. And the only churn we really get are people leaving this county, period. They're leaving. You know, I mean, that's the churn we have. We're looking to get rid of those people, you know, and have them move back to Michigan, to the family house. You know, like, I'm looking to give people an avenue. But then this goes back to the original question. Are we looking to keep it cheap for perpetuity no matter what for the future buyers at the cost or the expense of the owners? Or are we looking to create some mobility within here? Personally, I am one of mobility, but we didn't answer that the last time we were talking about this, and I'm not gonna pose that question again.
No, we're gonna wait till that red line comes back. and then
Well, you
we'll
know,
reach
that's-
out about it.
that's not meant to be.
Let's get the red line.
So again, I am not for property or asset limitations myself. Right? That's my answer. I'm not gonna go into any further.
And I think the distinction is qualification versus after ownership.
Sure, yeah, there's,
You already covered assets on that,
yes,
but property ownership will have the same questions.
Yeah, because I do feel like I've heard that maybe this is almost 2 questions. One, how do you feel about ownership and property in some manner when qualifying versus ownership of property after qualifying?
Yeah,
Because
that's-
I almost hear it there
Yeah.
too. And I will say, any disclaimer, if you own a property, you can still go and apply to buy a deed restricted property, you just are required to sell it within 120 days. So like, we're not stopping people from moving up or moving around just because they're not locked in if they hear this conversation of, well, I can't own another property if I wanna qualify for a new one. You can sell it within a certain amount of days, which is most likely
and
financially.
pay
really
capital gains and whatnot. We're like forcing that on people for the restriction as opposed to like turning it into another piece of good property, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, all the loopholes to not have to pay the tax on it and all, it's like we'd be forcing them into.
Sell that one and buy 2 in another state.
When you speak of
You
mobility.
know,
go
so,
ahead.
yeah, no, please go ahead, I've said enough, I believe.
When you speak of mobility, I think that's what we all would like to see. Really that's the hard puzzle to crack right now, right? The hard one really hard enough to crack, I should say. let's say you are in deed restriction. Let's say you work for one of the larger employers in this county, a long career with it. I work for a large employer. I gotta know the salary range of the different levels of, from the very bottom up to the very top. And if you are in deed restriction, even in one of the higher AMIs, without any other type of asset that you can invest in or hold for the future, you're not moving into a marketplace. Very unlikely. So I see after, I'm talking about after they're in, the accumulation of wealth in ways such as property are kind of the only way to really get that mobility in the market to then free up spots in workforce. There's just, it's that, you know, that we all know that that barrier has grown so big.
Yeah.
So,
And that's unique. We're not creating mobility because, because nobody's gonna be able to make that step. And we have missing that upper middle. And we're not gonna be focusing on that because we're focusing on the lower end because it doesn't even exist basically at this point. So yes, I'm with you.
Well, I think it exists for the lower people moving up out of a condo into, there is mobility. It is happening.
I think there's steps.
It's just the high end people aren't getting their mobility.
I also think that-
160 to 120s aren't getting their mobility, but the person goes, starts out a studio, moves into the, get into a one bedroom, if we're talking about who's holding this deep down, it's the ski resorts, I've been working in the ski resorts for a long time like you. We see people come and go all the time. That's what they rely on. They rely on college kids to come here for 5 years and leave because they want that salary down again. Once you get to 50, 60,000, they're looking at getting rid of you. That's the corporations around here.
Right, but our community is based on people who worked for the ski area and then said, all right, well, screw you to the ski area.
People were trying
I'm
to
gonna start my own business and I'm gonna grow my own wealth and my own ability here, right, in this place without having to leave.
and I want to think about those 160 AMI people. Those are not my priority. But those are the doctors that might have now been having to go into deed restriction because of how crazy the market is.
I think that we are missing some of the tools that we utilize or that are available for those folks, those higher earners, those 160s. They might not be able to go straight to market rate, but if they sell their deed restricted unit, whether it's between 600 or 800,000, and they want to go into that 1.2 market rate and utilizing tools like Housing Helps. Though the town of Frisco budget currently doesn't allocate for that for the next couple of years, that is available in records, that is available in the county, and they would be, if they sell their $600,000 to $800,000 unit, in the position to buy a unit of a similar size with Housing Helps, with only a work restriction, no AMI restriction. And so they still have to work in the county, but they can make the jump to what was market, it now has a deed on it, and that is a stepping stone,
Sure.
which they can own.
That's a great point.
Valid
And that is a stepping stone,
And that is one way, it's not necessarily perfect for everyone, but that is one way that folks can go from a high AMI or a high value deed restricted unit to another deed restricted unit that is more market, closer to market. It's larger, it's probably a step up, and they can build equity there for many years or stay there as long as they want, and then potentially sell that, who works in the county, the next person who grew in that. So it's not a perfect situation, but I think that we are offering some tools to those folks.
That's a good point.
Housing Helps is important. Obviously our Frisco budget has been allocated. Hopefully that there's more money freed up for Housing Helps, but I don't think it's our, again, I said this last meeting, I don't think it's our responsibility to give somebody a market rate home. They need to make increases in their financial situation to get there.
That's fine. How do we feel about property limitations?
Wait.
No, that is the original question.
This is all part of the original, so we did no asset limitations at this point, and how do we feel about property limitations at
And I
this
think
point?
with property limitations, if we're gonna, everyone has asked for input on and qualifications versus once you're in. If there's a difference of opinion, as far as you can't own another property when you're qualified, or you have to sell it if you purchase something versus live there, you have a right to invest in a property.
I would be
I would like that.
comfortable with the property limitation on qualification. I do not want any limitation.
I agree.
I could go with that too.
I am on the same page. I think there should be some upper tier. I think there should, I don't want it to be the condo in Denver that you're renting to build wealth. I want to encourage everyone in this community to build wealth, but I think we should consider if somebody owns 5 properties. I don't think that person who owns 5 properties should be in our workforce housing.
Another case on that was somebody moved, my neighbor, who the county loaned him $200,000 because he didn't qualify. And Scott Varga couldn't buy the $800,000 house, but he could do $600,000. The county loaned him $200,000.
Wow, it's the county manager that was,
I remember that.
was there not a,
That was a market rate house. It was a
Yeah, it was a
house.
market rate house,
It
and
was a market.
and my guess is that that was a way of having that person invest in the community.
Yeah.
Now, it
That's
also
how it
helped that person probably build some wealth,
Mhm.
I would guess.
He did, he bought it for $800 and he sold it for $1.
I guess I wanna put out the question of the council is, what are we referring to, one, for a reasonable amount of property versus multiple properties? I think that's a,
Katie, can you distinguish that, like in,
I think we can. I think an example here that from Dillon Valley, just write it and we draft it, and I'll check with that and legal after to see how he likes it. But basically, it would be greater than 1, and then you wanna have, I'm also hearing probably outside of Summit County residential property. By the way, commercial business property can be treated differently. But maximum of 1 residential property outside of Summit County, if that's what I'm hearing.
and
or-
is that what you want? You want one property? Is that-
be necessarily the number of properties. I think it should be a certain value or that might grow like the rate of homes do, but I think if somebody has, you know, let's say the average price of a home sale right now in Summit County is right around 1.5. If somebody has far in excess of that 1.5 in value of property, should they be in our workforce housing? I think it should be a value, not necessarily,
Depends on
because
what their AMI level is, and we don't set that. And if you qualify at a certain AMI, then that's the AMI you're at. So like, once again, like we're gonna get back into the semantics of, you know, how difficult it's gonna be to enforce this or not. And so, do we want property limitations? And if we do, is 1 property the limitation you want, because that's what it's gonna come back written as. And it's like, if we get it come back written as, it's harder at that point to then finally be like, well, you should actually have 5 properties should be the limit, and 1 is that, you know, I mean, like.
your point of what it comes back written as, we right now have the ability to give direction, whether it is a singular property or it is a value.
Correct.
I would say that it should be a value, it should not be the 1 property that you inherited or the hunting cabin or the $150,000 condo, right? I think there should be a value.
Like value at purchase or value at yearly assessment?
I think it should be value at yearly assessment. Not, you know, again, I want to encourage wealth building in our community. I think somebody should be able to purchase a condo and rent that.
But if that condo they purchased at 200 is now worth 600,
600 is not the 1 point. I'm thinking in the range of what the average market rate value home or the average home sale price is in Summit County. I think if somebody,
But a 2-bedroom condo now is going for 1.2.
yeah, that's right around the
So
average.
you're not actually like,
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Please.
Are you guys talking right now about after purchase? So they are already an owner.
after purchase.
Okay, so think about it from the enforcement side too. Are you going to enforce on somebody, or are you going to tell the town staff to enforce on somebody that has, their asset has gained tremendously in value? That you've allowed an asset,
Right.
maybe you've put a dollar limitation on it, or maybe you put a number in, of asset, houses, residential, houses, limit on it. Are you gonna tell staff to enforce on that?
Is it feasible to do a percentage of the workforce unit they live in or they own and say, okay, if you have 500% of your P1 neighborhood at 500, you know, is that, again, I know this is semantics to some, but that translates directly to the market goes up and down, a percentage versus a set value.
I think we can put in there anything we want.
And it's just a matter of how easy is it to enforce?
Yeah, and I think we can talk for days about how we, like, the perfect person in a workforce housing to look like financially, with their job, with their family. We can paint that picture, but it's never gonna be the same. And they're never gonna meet that picture. So I think when it comes down to like nitpicking to this level of limiting people, it feels a little excessive to me. I want people to be able to live here. I want people to be able to work. I also want people to feel like they've gained in their equity, in their finances. So I like the idea, but I think it's too much. That's my thought. I think just maybe like 1 or 2 properties max. Yeah.
One or two.
So deed restricted units is still wealth building.
That's true.
Okay, you're still wealth building. You still have equity, you're still building wealth. You're not paying a renter.
You own your
You're not
rent.
paying the landlord.
Yeah.
So you are building wealth, or you could stay in the rental.
Totally. It is a
Some people are
step
fine
up.
with that.
Yeah,
Robin,
Yeah.
you just said 1 or 2 properties.
yes. I know that.
I mean, I'm certainly okay with that 1 or 2 properties, but again, it's very hard to, again, enforce but I truly believe, and I would like to hear everyone else's perspective, should someone in our workforce housing be entitled or able to own unlimited properties elsewhere? I ask that question.
I see no limitations. You obviously have to be a certain AMI level, you have to qualify at a certain AMI level, that's where you live.
I appreciate really the parsing down to the possibilities of what we could put in there. Because, you know, Dan and Ryan, as you both know, people will abuse things. There will be. I don't think there's anyone disputing that. To me, it becomes more of a what's practically enforceable, what's balancing the needs of the people who are in there that could be on that far end, that could build their wealth in a way that maybe none of us could predict. And probably at that point, they voluntarily leave deed restriction housing, maybe not. Their neighbors get wind of it, that'll get out, that's for sure. But versus, are we battling an unknown enemy right now that really is not practical in the reality? So in my mind, when I balance all that, I'm with Andy. So,
And
limitation.
Hold on, sorry, can I clarify? I think you said.
No, I'm sorry, property.
Property, but I think before I wrote you down is limit qualification, you can't.
If we're parsing out the two, then I'm fine with a limitation and qualification.
Okay, so no ownership in other property at qualification, but unlimited ownership in other property.
I almost would allow even the property. Again, I want to make things as simple, but also keeping an eye open for violent things that could turn into violations. But however we are on qualifying, if it's none, that's what the majority is making, I'm okay with that. This is where you can really be a little more simplistic, what you're bringing to the table to get into our deed restriction housing versus afterwards, I have no limitation.
So for purchase of new buyer or a buyer looking to move into a deed restricted unit of any sort, Mary, Andy and Martin are okay with no no limit on other property ownership.
once they're in.
Yeah,
Non-qualified.
the opposite of what you.
Andy,
Wait, you support people owning other property, correct?
That's poor people over the other.
Including when they purchase,
Yes.
yes, and you too.
Well, I'm
And sorry, that's where I got it.
Yes, as I said.
Okay, sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Yeah.
You're more with it than I.
Trying to figure out what it is we said.
I have 3 different colors. First, second, third.
For a limitation on property
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't understand.
afterwards. Once they're in.
Okay.
I could go along with what Marvin, qualification, you shouldn't have another property. And that's not commercial.
And then you,
I would say at qualification, yep, no other properties. I would know that I'm the sole person here
That
at
qualification with one other property was okay, right? Or not? That was what you were saying.
I'm okay with one property qualification, can parse that out. Like, that is like the grandmother.
I thought you just said, none in nuclear. I agreed with it, and now you're changing, so I'm not agreeing now.
Play the recording.
If you have a TV lectures today.
Let me be clear,
Let's.
to be clear, now pre-qualification. I'm for a limitation, pre-qualification of property. If the conversation sticks with no property, I can go with that. If it sticks with one piece of property, I can go with that. Any more than that, I would say no. So 0 or 1. I hate to be that way, Katie.
that's okay.
And then on the, once they're in, no limitation.
I think I have heard 3, Dan, Robin, and Zach say no ownership in other property and qualification.
Yes. I would.
that's where I'm at. And again, I truly do believe the value matters. I think that, well, I would be comfortable with one other property if it does not exceed, let's double the value of the workforce housing unit they are trying to purchase. Family home, in most other places, be real, most other places in the country, $1 million home is a pretty decent home. Not here in Summit County, but, so I would say double the value of the workforce housing unit they're trying to purchase. And I would say, once they are in, building well, I want to encourage. I would like to put a percentage on that as well, but I don't think that it's feasible. And I think that I would agree with Andy that at some point, once you have built that wealth and you have many other properties, you are probably moving out of deed restricted voluntarily. Yes, I would say at time of qualification, if they don't own property that is double the value of what they're trying to purchase. That's my.
I think I've got a 1, a 2, and a 2.
Okay, but in
That's why we discussed.
wholeheartedly with Martin's approach, I just don't want someone to have that $2 million property elsewhere trying to get into the $500,000 deed restriction here in Frisco.
Bev, what do you think about if he was limited? Well, I guess then we're back to changing it to the asset. We call it part of the assets.
You can do, well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you're talking about setting assets aside and just talking about the ownership of residential property and then grafting on top of that, but not worth more than. What's your property worth? Are you sure?
Yeah.
What's your property worth? Are you sure?
You're right.
Right? So even when people are being honest, right? Even when they're going to give you an honest answer, it's going to be based on their biased belief. Right? And their belief is going to be biased on what the value of the property is on the low side when it's to their benefit, and biased to the high side when it benefits them that way. So So without even people playing liar's poker or going on an affidavit, what you're asking them to do is, I think just adds another layer of difficulty to a limitation, to enforcing a limitation.
Then I will remove my perspective of value and I will go with one other property.
Is that also, as soon as you put value on it, mixing it with assets? Which makes it more difficult.
And I'm not here to say there aren't other independent way. I mean, you can go look at the assessed value of anything. The assessed value compared to the real value, or, you know, we all.
Pretty close nowadays, though.
You're right.
Used to be,
a really big difference.
But you also have to understand state law per state in order to understand
Yes,
how
you-
that assessor does that.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And there are other states with limitations like we have. Coming over the ratios.
I think we have majority stating you could have a maximum of one other property when you're qualifying and when you. I think that's what I'm hearing.
And when you, now you're going, and you cannot own other properties once you.
You said one
You can't.
property.
Just the one other property.
Yeah, we're hearing one of the properties.
Don't speak here again.
Well, but.
Yeah.
As chair, that's where you should
Yeah.
step in and say, let's read it.
What I'm saying. What this is my assumption of what all you guys have said is that time of purchase, you can have one property only, and then there will be no property limitation beyond that. Is that where everybody's,
Position.
is that where you guys are at or no? Yay or nay?
I don't want to like put no limitations, you know. You know, that you have to be.
Listen, how about yes or no? Like, you know, so, okay.
Yep.
So, thank you. Right, so, right, you have the limitation of one residential property when you're buying, when you're qualifying, and then after that, nobody's gonna go back and decide, well, you turned that one property into 5 properties, now you have to sell your place, correct? You guys, are you with me on that or no? And I'm not
I'm with you.
on the decision, because I'm on the other side of the decision. But what I'm saying is, there is one property limitation at time of purchase, and there are no limitations beyond that.
I am a no.
Dan said
I'm
no,
no.
Robin.
Okay.
I'm for a limitation on the back.
Okay, so 3 say no. So,
We just have not,
No limit on the back end, apparently.
we have not established what the limit is, and that is a very hard thing to establish. I understand that. But I truly believe it is important that if somebody has millions of dollars of property assets elsewhere, they should not be in our workforce housing.
You know, Andy, maybe the way you just phrased, kind of going around the table there, I just caught this on me. So I think we're all in agreement. We're not all in agreement, but I think the majority of the council is saying on qualification, what piece of property?
That's one, yes.
Correct.
Okay,
Now we've tabled that.
okay,
Now we go to the back end. I think maybe when you posed it, maybe you were thinking how you vote for it, yes or no. And you were posing kind of what you and I are saying, no limitations. So are you voting, or are you not voting, but are you recommending no limitations? Which is what I'm recommending. So they can have the Taj Mahal after that. I mean, that's, you know, if you just want to take it to extremes, right? I'm saying after they have purchased their deed restricted housing, qualified, I'm putting no property limitations on that home.
that's
That's what
what
I'm saying. Is that what
From
you're
him.
understanding? You guys
No.
do want limitations.
I would like some type of limitation, and I think that's a very difficult limitation to put. I think that is worth putting our time and discussion into, because I believe if somebody has, again, I think a percentage of the deed restricted home they own, if it is 300% or more, you know, if you have a $500,000 home in P1 and you have $1.5 million of homes elsewhere, I don't think they should, I think we should encourage them to move on.
So it's a no.
It can be more than encouragement.
I could be wrong. There are no other deed restrictions that allow other property ownership, is that right?
Of the 2019 covenant does not. I believe most, I can't say none, because I don't know them all by heart. In Frisco, the live work ones, I don't know what they say, I believe, I have to look up like Basingham, for example, that are more of a like those 40 light restrictions we have. The true AMI cap deed restriction, I believe that I wanna say they all don't, none of them allow you to own other property, but I can't,
I
that's
think
not.
that was a very early limitation.
Yeah,
I also think it's
and
important.
there's 150 different limitations in the county, you know what I mean, so like, they're all different. Right, and so we're not gonna, I would suggest that we're not gonna try to pigeonhole Katie and saying that this is what the
Yeah,
majority
but
do,
most of them-
because they're all very different.
The reason that I ask is because I know what people are asking for in this restriction, and we're not necessarily giving it to them at this point, so this could be something that's speaking to the deal.
I think that's a very good perspective, that any deed we come up with here is going to replace the 2019 covenant. And if we don't have something like this, a lot of the homeowners and people we're not giving them what they want, they're not gonna buy into this. We are setting this covenant to hopefully encourage people to opt in that currently own their home, but also set the future direction for future deed restrictions in Frisco. Anything that is built, anything that does come with housing helps. We are trying to create something that is gonna be all encompassing, that benefits people and homeowners currently, and also creates the vision for the future of Frisco deed restrictions.
I would venture to say that all of these limitations we're talking about entirely hinder them. They would not opt into this for the most part. So
Those homeowners
that's
that are-
my view of those homeowners there, because I've spoken to many of them. You know, and I know what they asked in their letters and everything else, but we haven't talked about QCIs yet, right? And so we've already said, this council has already said 3%, no attachment to AMI upon selling, but you get QCIs. We haven't talked about what that is, right? And so 100% in that right now, we are either gonna limit them, we're gonna hinder them, or we're gonna give them the ability to have something more. Why would you opt in if you were then going to be hindered with whatever properties you're gonna buy in the future or you're gonna try to? Because especially right now with your original covenant, you could sell it to your friend and charge whatever the hell you wanted to charge for your shed or your real estate fee, whatever else. And we're spinning our wheels for no reason whatsoever.
Katie, can I ask a
Well,
point of clarification?
you can't ask all the time, because Lawrence, she wanted $22,000. The county came back and says, your shed, and this is not worth $22,000.
I know that from the article.
Yeah, but they are.
Yeah, but the others on the paper, she sold her couch for $40,000.
Yeah.
She sold it, whatever. We're not gonna get into our past county commissioners or loopholes of how they dealt with,
It's pretty.
you know, so like, but the thing is like, the loopholes exist there already. Everybody knows it, right? And so we are either trying to create something, this gets back to my original question, is that we are trying to create something that's not wasting everybody's time, right? And with all of the limitations, I venture to say we are wasting everybody's time.
Can I ask you a
I
question,
think,
Katie?
sorry.
Yeah, just real quick. Let's say we pulled off this together tomorrow and we have the new, ready to roll out. The people signing the new ones, since they're already homeowners, they would not have to, like, and they had already maybe bought some property, they're not re-qualifying. So like.
That was a question that came up.
Well,
It's a
yeah,
great question, and it might have been from you, but I had not gotten an answer to yet.
Okay.
It was a great question, and the question, just to explain to the group, because I kind of covered it off, was if you opt into the new covenant and the current covenant didn't allow, do you have to comply as you go into it? And that was something
Like
that,
re-qualifying.
yes, that you require.
Because that changes to
It's a good question. We're not doing it
We've
right
never
now.
required that.
We Anybody who
That would change my perspective.
I can tell you, we've never requalified anybody who's opted into the 2019 covenant. We've never even thought to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ted's shaking his head, no, we wouldn't do it in the future.
And for instance, is right now, 2019 covenant, and I believe the original covenant for Peak One does not allow ownership of other property.
Correct.
So this is an extreme statement, but allowing one is 100% more.
Well, I mean, it could be. Well, maybe,
Sure,
It is allowed
it is,
to-
more. It is
Yeah.
more. Uh, Is it enough?
and maybe we need
That's the
to
big question.
dig into it. To be clear, if we do have, yes, I get it, if we have people here, same people who have purchased property and maybe they've been in violation of the current. But what they've been trying to do is invest in themselves so that they, when they come in, I'd be okay with them carrying that over to the new covenant. Would be okay with that. I mean, philosophically, even though they maybe,
A lot of the
Well, so
feedback we
that's the one
received from,
unit you can have, the one unit you own that you can have when you sign on to the new covenant, is what you're saying.
but they're in violation of the old covenant. I would say I would be okay not carrying them.
one of my big takeaways from public comment and emails that we have received is that folks want the ability to build wealth. We feel that we are hindering them from doing that under the 2019 covenant. And I think this is one way that says we want to encourage our community to build wealth. It's a healthy community, and if you are able to purchase another home, I'm okay with that, again, based on my initial point of as long as it's not in excess.
So you're allowed to build some wealth, but not too much.
I think, yes, Andy, I think too much is a thing to be in workforce housing. Too much wealth means you should be in the position to purchase retail marketing. You should not be taking a workforce unit that others that have nowhere near that level of wealth are working so hard to get.
And I would venture to say, anybody who is in workforce housing that has been able to build immense wealth has left workforce housing and bought themselves a market value unit.
But
That's what I would say. We're not gonna get into semantics of like, you can have $500,000 of this or anything else. Like, let's just decide that we're not gonna get into those semantics right now. The question was, are we gonna have property limitations on purchasing a unit? And then beyond that, it was, are we gonna have property limitations at time of sale? And then are we gonna have property limitations beyond?
And I think
Period.
we answered the first question of at time of purchase, the council seemed to say one property. I think
That's
that
right.
question has been answered.
And then, so the second was,
We are talking about unlimited wealth. I share my perspective. I think there should be a cap, and I would call the question with council. Does the rest of the council think there should be unlimited wealth building in a workforce housing unit?
I like the way you phrase it.
Yeah. Well, you can.
I stand by the original question. I'm putting forth my position on the original question, and that is, once they are in, once they're a homeowner, I'm voting for no limitation on property
okay,
ownership.
all right, so those are two opposite right there.
Yep.
I'm more with Martin, although I don't even agree on the first part, but that's okay. So that's 1 and 1. Actually 2 and 1. You're with Zach? Okay, Robin, I hate to say you're the tiger.
I just,
Something's gonna come down, you gotta speak up a little quicker.
you want a straight answer. But something that came to mind is this idea of mobility and people wanting to move on and out of workforce housing. If we do this unlimited after time of purchase, then if that homeowner wants to move, they will have to sell all of their other properties and or buy a market rate house. They would not be eligible to go back into a different deed restrict tax, which I think could be helpful Because buying multiple properties could help people build enough wealth to then move into market rate. And that would create that mobility. And it wouldn't put them back in deed-restricted housing. It would be that stepping stone. I'm thinking out loud a little bit here.
Yeah.
But that, with that in mind, I'm leaning towards unlimited. That's my answer.
After time of purchase,
After time of.
For- or while you own the deed, it's unlimited for amount of property. Do we have that? I mean, that's basically the deal. We are 3-2 on that, right?
That's what I.
We are 2-3 on at time of purchase. We are, right, and then we are already done with asset limitations. That's it. Is that enough? Are we got it?
Ready to move on to the next.
Are we all right there?
Yeah.
Because we keep
It's
going.
coming back,
You
yeah.
know,
Coming back.
it's gonna.
We're gonna beat it to
keep
death.
going on, but yeah, you know, that was an hour and a half, basically.
Yeah.
But I think this is an important.
I think the time is well spent.
Not an easy.
Yeah, I don't think we should expect this is just a quick 3 work session thing. I think this is the most important thing we've worked on since I've been on this council, and I think we should dedicate the necessary time.
That's never 2018, so who's juicy.
Okay, cap on real estate commission.
Yes,
You know, I see this as sort of that Elizabeth Lawrence situation. I hate to bring her, but you know, this is sort of the situation. You get a friend of yours who's a
we have,
real estate agent, you know.
we have real estate agents that own deed restricted homes,
Yeah, that's true.
and they could very well, yes, so about the rest of the council, I think this is clear that there should be a cap. That is my perspective. There should be a cap on real estate commission for deed restricted.
Yep.
Dan, yep, there you go. You got your answer.
If the cap is wanted, it is the maximum permitted. FCHA recommendation provided on May 13th was to allow a maximum of 2% real estate commission. I will tell you, that is, we do have local real estate agents who offer that because they care about local housing. So I do think that's a fair, and the ones who say they want more, it's questionable why when we are getting realtors who offer 2%.
Especially considering when these units are for sale. And I think the council, we did discuss, did we get to terms with the lottery, the preference last week or not?
We got to suggestion of tickets with a little bit more information.
Okay, so if there's a lottery happening, if this real estate agent is not putting in their time showing multiple houses, it is one house. The real estate agent is not doing the typical work that earns a commission in the real estate world.
Right, are you saying it's easy money?
I'm saying it's an easy 2%, yes, and we have real estate agents that don't touch deed restriction, for that very reason. They say, I'm not gonna make any money on it.
Yeah.
And that's okay, they can sell the multi-million-dollar Summit County homes, but I think it's a cap. I think 2% is reasonable.
To Katie's point, there are brokers that are happy to do that for locals to assist the cause, so I think 2% is good.
Yep,
I think 2%.
Good. Phew. That wouldn't do
They're
bad.
blasting.
Oh, man, we already answered.
All right,
the
so
tough
we
one.
have but 27 minutes left. Do you want to do income buffer? With this, this is just as a reminder, you have your AMI chart, and let's say you have a 100% unit. This would be to say your income, instead of looking at the chart at 100% income, we would let you make up to 120 or 140 or however many percentage increase the council decided. SCHA recommendation to you was to allow a 20 to 40% income buffer. We hear from numerous people. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say sorry, I probably have heard so I do hear both sides, but I think the big thing to keep in mind is that when the housing authority is recommending it at this point, they are seeing people's qualify, and they are seeing the struggle people have to buy what they chart or whatever property is being sold at and making their bills work, whether they have tuition they're still paying or daycare or car payments or whatever they're like. So the recommendation is you do allow an income buffer.
So you can buy in at 100% AMI, you make 100% AMI at that point, and then,
No, if
No, you
you
can make
qualify.
up to
120.
okay,
Yeah, so you base it, not you, sorry.
yeah,
Is
Yeah.
somebody looking for, trying to buy a 2-bedroom at 80%, I highlighted your unit, right now that yellow at the top is what that household can make. If you allowed an income buffer of 10%, then you would look at the 90% income. If you allowed a 20% a buffer, could make up to that, so you basically are allowed to make, your sale price stays the same, but your income could be higher when you purchase.
so you can qualify for that unit at
You have a better
You can
chance.
buy a lower level AMI unit, your income.
It is part of the theory of that it allows in the range of expenses that affect affordability. If you have 3 kids, it's a whole different situation if you have no kids. For instance, with childcare or other expenses, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way I think about it.
Do we penalize people who, please don't take this as a position, it's a question. Does this inherently though penalize people based on or reward based on decisions? So you brought up student loans, right? You know, does this penalize someone who might have went to a small state college in Precedent? Salem, and not
They
have a
would
student?
probably find that it is unfair to open the eligible lottery entrance of the lottery to a bigger, you'd have a bigger pool of
Right,
people who
right.
could qualify. And people would, and I can't remember, sorry, I didn't, but I think at a prior meeting I had benefits, who doesn't, and I don't have that in this one. I will say randomly, we have, these are pasted from existing covenants. There are many examples of the peak one that had an 80% unit, the buyer was allowed a higher income. So without ever knowing why, because I wasn't here then, the town and the developer allowed an income buffer on individual units of all different scales with no uniformity that we can find. And all we can just think of is somebody made too much for that unit and they wanted them to buy it. And so they said, you can buy it, we'll make your 80%. And so it's an 80% for sale unit. In that top example, that buyer has a 90% eligible household in their covenant. The one below is 120% AMI unit. It's on the map that way. The covenant says 120% AMI, but your eligible household was allowed to make 170% for that unit. And that is at least half of the peak one covenants have random numbers that have been signed off on. And that we continue to honor those numbers because that's what was recorded. And so basically peak one has allowed an income buffer on individual unique cases on many of their covenants in the past.
Have you noticed that at all with 80 to 90 other ownership deed restrictions that we have?
No.
AMI
It
ownership
was only
deed restriction,
done
yeah,
on peak one.
interesting.
Yeah, Southwick Village they actually had some changes made to their specific covenants, but it was as a whole, as a development, as a case by case based on each covenant was handwritten and signed, typed out and then signed off on it by, so I don't know if anyone knows that initials or not.
I would say, David O'Neill, if you're watching this, please return my call. Check you.
So they're basically already or in peak one, on not on all units, though, I wanna be clear, and as you can see here, I didn't just pull 2 and it's not the only 2. Like, there is an inconsistency of when they were allowed different numbers, I don't have the background, we honor it, I'm sure there was a reason, and I'm sure it was a good one.
Can we go back to the amateur we're discussing here? So we are discussing, Summit Combined Housing Authority's recommendation was somewhere between a 20 to 40% buffer. So can we just, what are the blue highlights?
That was going up by 10s, 10%, 20%, just so, because you could do any percent you want if you choose to allow any.
But we are,
Right here, you're talking about allowing somebody who is more wealthy than the person who's making 80%
Well,
AMI.
I'm trying to look at that in, well,
You're changing, you're changing the level of AMI restriction on the unit only because
could it be
we
something,
want to give them.
well, could it be something that if there's a lot of units that are studios and all that, is it something that if that unit doesn't sell, then there's a buffer?
Which
You
is the
know,
way
can
the
we do-
2019 was created.
That's the way 2019.
2019 actually has, you have the first 30 days is open to somebody at that AMI who also works in the town of Frisco.
Yeah.
Within the boundaries. If it does not go under contract after 30 days, it opens up to Summit County and there's a 20% income buffer. So we do have that in 2019 and that's the way it's written. Is you get 20% if it doesn't. Now, so far, everyone in the 2019 covenant is sold within 30, under contract within 30 days. We've never seen anyone go beyond the priority period, so we don't have any facts for that part of it.
Is there any, if that seems to be working, is there any reason to change it?
I think what council had discussed last week, that we didn't necessarily want a 30-day priority window, just for, we wanted to consider that Summit County, long-term Summit County residents, workers 10 years or more, should be eligible in that.
That was within the lottery discussion.
Yeah. So I think that is one thing that 2019 probably did very well, except our council already decided long-term Summit County residents, not just Frisco or 10 Mile Basin residents.
Well,
So
I
you
would like
can-
to see the same thing as the lottery goes to Frisco people and then nobody can afford it, then it goes to Summit County.
So backing up on that, sorry, taking that step away right now and focusing on the income buffer. How do we feel about no income buffer for the first 30 days?
You just get people who are at that AMI level.
I think that's what I might be hearing
Yeah.
from people.
I didn't agree with that.
And then what would the buffer be? Because 170% getting into a 120% unit doesn't sound reasonable.
I say it's either 20 or 10.
Yeah,
Yeah, 40 is a.
40,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I say 10 myself, just for, as what, pie in the sky, what a buffer should be for myself.
The 2019,
I mean, when you're talking
20,
about
after the
$12,000.
first 30 days.
After the first 30 days, it's all pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
But again, we haven't had to use it because it hasn't come up.
I don't know, let's say we're talking an 80% AMI unit as on the chart, that goes from 95 to 107, that's a $12,000 difference. That is one night a week busing tables. I don't know that 10% at 80% AMI is a big enough buffer. $12,000, excuse me?
That's something on the town council basically, as far as like, you have your job, you qualified, you got into your unit, and then you got this side job here that's making you an extra 12 grand a month. To bump you to a different AMI level in order to be able to buy,
12
It's
grand.
still,
1,000, right?
no, not a month. That's a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It seems to be working the way it is. I would hope that, just to like keep an eye into the future. That we do the 20% after 30 days and maybe if we're changing things, like if for some reason the market goes down, the economy is really bad, maybe we should continue to open it up another 10% every 30 days, just so people won't get stuck with poverty.
I like the idea.
And hopefully it'll never be used. But
well, yeah, I mean, the thing is can we not find anybody at that right AMI level?
Well, and remember, then you have to lower the cost-based sale price. So the answer to all of this also is, I didn't find a qualified buyer. The town staff's answer right now is then you need to lower the price you're trying to sell it at. You're not guaranteed your maximum sale price. And that happened back, I think it was around like 2010, there was people who were really struggling to sell in South End Village and everything. Because if they had to lower the price, they didn't wanna lower them with interest rates. So there is always, you are not covered guaranteed you can sell, which is gonna be a point when we bring up qualifying capital improvements, if you allow unlimited. Is it any, that's gonna be part of it, well, even if you added them, it's okay to allow them, because will somebody ever be able to actually afford that, so same as every topic. If you, how far do you wanna go up on an income buffer, knowing the seller could also have to sell, lower the cost that maybe they're trying to sell it to?
There. Yeah, I like going up 20% after 30 days.
So I have
I'm at 20%.
20.
Looking at an individual, 100% MI is one person household is 93,000. You go up to 120, the 111,000. Just about $20,000, a little under $20,000 difference. I think that's reasonable. I don't know if the rest of council thinks 10 is the place to start.
I would start at 10, I think 20 is
Because also the way lotteries go, it's so uncommon that within that first 30 days, you know, whoever the top 5 people on the lottery list are, that somebody doesn't close on that problem. Especially when we look at Frisco's 155 deed restricted units. Have we seen much of this where
Used it at all, you said?
No,
No, yeah, so it's only in the 2019 covenant, but it's only about 20 of them. And no, any of those that sold, no one went past. To be honest, everyone went under contract within the first week.
So I think this is one of those things that probably isn't even utilized, but let's say something sits on the market. And then that seller has the potential to have one more opportunity to sell at the price they want.
Yeah.
And then if that buffer hasn't been met, then they realize they probably have to lower their price.
Okay, so no income buffer, and then after 30 days, I heard 2 10s, but I think I heard 3 20s. Is that accurate?
I think he would go to 20, I'm 20.
I'm okay with 20.
The 20. Okay, look at us praying through topics. I'll admit, I'm not sure if I'm ready to, I didn't think we'd get to right to inspect. Does the council want to add a right to inspect? The CHA recommendation provided was to have a right to inspect clause. This is one that I meant to follow up with Corey on to learn more about, because we don't have it right now. I have examples from her that she gave me, but this is one that I don't have enough experience and we haven't worked with it in Frisco.
Myself, you know, in conversations that I've had with Corey, I suspect that this is about verifying improvements.
Correct.
Because we are making allowances for improvements. So, but I think we should verify with Corey what this recommendation was about.
They come back
So
to,
hold off.
I should have done that before tonight,
Okay.
sorry. Okay, so left for big topics, we have qualifying capital improvement, employment location verification, and enforcement. I think that's about it.
those are easy enough.
oh, yeah.
That's why I'm skipping a little bit, recognizing you have about 10 minutes left of this conversation. How about initial purchase price? We would like to change the initial purchase price. I think the council is okay if we propose a new purchase price. The current formula is a standard HOA fee that's not necessarily applicable. And there's just a lot of better, newer ways to do it. We can talk about it now. I can propose something and bring it back to you. I'm not sure if this is really one that everyone's gonna disagree and have different opinions on. So I'm thinking we might be able to move forward with this, but let me know if not. And again, this is initial purchase price means a new build. It means a developer just built and we are putting a new covenant, a new unit. And
According to the AMI chart.
well, it's not according to the AMI chart the way it's written right now, and we'd like to move more towards that method, or at least some way that's a lot more simple. It's so complicated right now that Corey has created calculators for people and luckily used a template because realtors cannot even understand how to do it and staff cannot help them because it's beyond our comprehension also. It goes down to a lot of Very common. So we would like to just say, is everyone okay if I propose a different way to do it? And then we can talk about it.
I would like to see simplification.
Yeah, it's very I mean, you could talk to people trying to sell the units right now at 90-97 flat, they're a realtor, and luckily Corey basically created a calculator to help explain it, cause she understands it. And the housing authority staff understands our covenant. Alright, we did ownership. That's the recap. So you can do QCIs, we can do employment location requirement. And we could do, those are the main ones,
I
what?
think QCIs is probably a little bit more in depth of a conversation.
Very much
Employment,
so, but it's also probably more political. So it's important here.
Yeah, so your choice, just thinking of time, it's about 10 minutes till we're gonna end.
You know, sort of, what did you decide on right to inspect, or did you just?
I wanna get more information, unless you all understand it and have an answer, I don't feel comfortable explaining it. And I meant to do that, but we got to it, and I totally forgot that I was gonna do that.
All right.
I think if they're putting in qualified, you know, we have a room, if we have to inspect it, we have to look at it.
So before you,
I still do.
this was about occupancy, use and occupancy verification through inspections.
I think we have to.
They created the PowerPoint last month, and I knew we weren't gonna get it for last week. Yeah.
I think we could touch on employment location requirements. I would assume most of the council agrees that our workforce housing units should be for folks who work in the community. I think that's a pretty good.
We already kind of answered that before, didn't we?
So that question comes into, we're okay, so support for continuing to verify employment. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, and then the real question is, what is employment? If you're working for a company and your paychecks come from Massachusetts, but you are living there and you work in your house, are you employed, meeting the
I
covenant?
feel it's a very important discussion. There's a lot of constituents who really are focused on this. And a lot of different views too. So I don't know if we're ready to pump 9 minutes into this, or maybe we just need.
That's what we got, we can.
We can start.
Yeah, personally, you know, there's a lot of people who work for Vail. Where did their check come from? It comes from Blue. Right? You know, if it's that you're a lift operator and that is okay, or you're, you know, running.
The same with copper, any
Yeah,
basis.
same with copper and everything
Well,
else. I think
that
for
distinction,
example,
though, it depends on how, you have to read our deed restriction in a way.
Because they have a physical location
Yeah, I mean,
in Summit County.
but then, you know, if you're using the Vail example, do you work corporate? Do you work at property in Suffolk County? That might be that could be the distinction.
Serving building.
Mark, can you elaborate on your position? Are you comfortable doing that for us?
Sure. Feel what my job is.
Yeah, what your job is, and are you serving Summit County directly, or are you more so serving Vail Resorts as a whole?
Yeah, no, I serve Summit County directly. I've had a lot of positions with the company. I've had two different director positions. I'm currently director of engineering for hospitality at Keystone and Breckenridge.
Okay.
And there's been some other departments have been added to that recently. My office is at Keystone. And my operations, all my staff work at Keystone.
So I think that's a pretty clear indication of somebody who works at the Vail corporate level in a director position, but is directly serving our community at a high level role versus somebody whose staff and everybody that reports to them might be in the Broomfield office or at a different resort elsewhere. And I know that Vail Resorts is a major employer here. I don't think we should disqualify folks like yourself, but if somebody is working from home, but all of their subordinates are working at a different resort or working at Broomfield, I think that should be in question.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this came because of COVID, when remote working started, this wasn't an issue. Most people working in Greenfield would be living in Greenfield almost to a T. And in fact, both Vail, I think Copper to some extent too, they moved people out of these mountains for that reason back in the day. There are people work for Copper, and again, it's not a Vail Copper, he basically corrupt me. But there are people that have hybrid jobs now. And does that need to be considered?
Yeah, it's like that starts to get into the nuances.
Right. It's obviously a difference if you work for Whole Foods here or you work for Whole Foods Denver. Foods corporate somewhere else in the country, right?
The way that I would like to look at it is that your job requires you to be in Summit County, despite where the paycheck comes from.
To some extent, that's how the current deed is written, is it not? If your job requires you to be in Summit County?
So, and I
No,
apologize,
based
I
upon
don't
the
have it.
location of the employer, not the nature of the job.
So,
That's the distinction that this conversation is drawing. Right now, it looks at the nature of the employer, doesn't care, right? The longer you have an employer that has a physical presence in the county, doesn't care what your job is for that employer, so long as there's a physical presence and that employer serves the county.
so we say, and I'll have it on the slide next time, earns his or her living from a business operating in Summit County by working in such business an average of at least 30 hours. So we say, at all times during ownership and occupancy, earns his or her living from a business operating in Summit County. And we get really stumped at deed monitoring. What is a business operating in Summit County?
Right, well, City Market is in Summit County, and if you
Is
work your way up
Yeah.
in City Market, and all of a sudden you've got a merchandising job for City Market, and you're now traveling the region, still working for City Market, I'm not looking to kick people out of their houses for this. It's all goes back into, are we creating the ability for mobility, and if you're gonna hinder Martin, not that he doesn't live in workforce housing, but working for Vail, and then you got a better job with Vail, and then you got an even better job with Vail. Or, does that mean we are gonna kick you out of your house because you got too good a job? I don't agree with that at all. And so, it's one thing if you work for Aldi, no Aldi in Summit County, different story, right? You work for Nordstrom's, you work for Amazon, right?
So let's say, just to get me out of the picture. But I think your point about, but I think it's a good point. Let's use City Market as an example, right? Kroger.
Yep.
Let's say you start at City Market here in the county, then you do get a better job, still meeting all the requirements, income requirements and all that stuff. But you're in the accounting department for whatever reason right now, their accounting is remote. But the company needs an accounting department to keep the City Market open in Summit County. To keep the company functioning, right? So I would be against kicking that person out too.
Right.
Yeah.
That under the current language of from a business operating in Summit County, the example of the Kroger employee who goes higher and higher up and now travels or is in finance and not working locally at a City Market in Summit County.
It's not what it says. It says a business operating in Summit County. Kroger's still a business operating in
So-
Summit County. That individual is working for that business.
So it's still
That's
Absolutely.
it. So they're-
Absolutely. But this isn't that qualification.
Well, this, sorry, and this is.
Right, I mean, in our version of the location, the physical location of the business is the proxy for whether it's serving the county or not, right? It takes part of the assumption that accountants are as important for operating a business for the benefit of Summit County as are the person who puts the buns in the ovens, literally, as a baker at 5 a.m. every morning, right? No, it doesn't cut distinctions that fine.
So is everyone okay with the current language then maybe?
Okay with the current language.
But I presume under this language, we are not allowing remote workers for Google, for instance.
Well, because Google doesn't
We
have
have
a location here.
one household that works for a private company in Denver and is out of Denver. And we didn't find during monitoring last year that they worked enough hours in Summit County. Most of the work is doing work outside in other parts of the state. But we did not feel as staff that we had support from the council at that time to kick that person out of their house and make them sell it. And so we have not followed up on enforcement. But so I do know of one of that situation, the ones everyone's describing, we know there's multiple of those in existing covenants and we have never enforced, we've never.
Is that example company, a company that is somehow based in Summit County?
There's nothing.
So
in
there's
it.
no connection whatsoever.
Okay, we're getting close on time, but I'm gonna throw another wrench in here. And me being the example, this isn't the case anymore, but say you have a company that services other companies on Amazon, right? This is where I used to be, but I'm no longer, right? Our business, our sales agency is located in Frisco, Colorado. We have a business license,
Business license.
we operate the business, right?
That's it.
We don't, and this is the distinction, as opposed to Amazon or Helly Hansen, where somebody is not in
Doesn't have a
this
business
county.
license.
And so that's, really just wanted to make that distinction that
In the
we understand
example,
that, you know.
in the example that Katie has illustrated, there are other jurisdictions in Summit County are enforcing.
Correct, they
those
are
situations.
requiring people to sell their unit.
I don't feel comfortable with our time frame.
So maybe we revisit this a little bit.
I guess my one thing is how other jurisdictions are enforcing this
Yep.
would be valuable.
And I do know we had a pending question in the past that I did not get an answer to, I just remembered also, and that was, where did the people go? So I'm remembering this just on the spot.
When they leave.
When they were required to sell, did they stay in the county or did they leave the county? I do know that it's a work session that asked that. in the past, so I
Okay,
was-
you can answer that?
I can ask the county and rec if they know where they're, they might not know, but they might.
Okay, that's good info to have for sure.
We knew this topic was gonna be a
QCI's being the next big, I have noted that 3 hours a week. So QCI's, I think, being the big thing that we really have to answer to determine whether or not we're coming up with the covenant. And it's gonna wanna be part of.
Needs to be continued in the next work session, just to be clear for the public.
Yes, so at least for the APC, yeah. Okay, so with that, thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
And hopefully you got something out of there. Thank you, guys. You know, disagreeing with you.
We will.
We love All right, and so we are now going to move to our second thing on the agenda, which is the Summit Huts at the Peninsula Recreation Area. Absolutely. Protest. That's. Good. Good.
Weird, anyway. Anyway.
$250 and I don't think we can get to like these leaves.
Yep.
Vacation.
Yeah. Yes.
Just do Great, I'm excited. Maybe start. I saw green. So I'm like, anyway. Oh.
Yeah. It's my. When I was elected. Really?
Thank you.
Right. I knew they would get paid. Keep it there. Yeah. And I don't. They don't.
Thank you.
I think that's a good job. What? Just something. But just you're saying.
I think we're all.
Yeah, thanks. So that's what I get. Just doesn't grow. Yeah.
It's really great too. And anybody who wants to support, they can do something.
You got me. So
It should be free access. If people like appreciate the doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, you want to take it away?
Thanks for the first 2 hours discussion. I'm sure it was very robust. We'll roll into a conversation with Winston in what's going on in Summit Huts and in Peninsula Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Want to do some intros before I get rolling?
Greg Guevara is Summit Huts Executive Director. Kate Swenson, the Trails Manager, and North Summer Interpret Frisco.
Zach Ryan, new council, appointed in February, active PRA user, Summit Huts, visitor. Appreciate what you guys do.
I'm all ready. Fill in the council meetings. Super excited to hear what you guys have.
Dan Kitty, council member.
Martin Allen, council member and Big Bad, so.
Pat Renault, town attorney.
Tom Fisher, town manager.
Andy Held, Mayor Pro Tem.
Cool, we're taking there.
What was the script I gave you on the memory?
Right.
And I'm Greg Guevara, you said, executive director, so that's. Hey, Greg.
Well, we will, we'll jump into this. The overview per your packet is the discussion of a hut up on the Peninsula Recreation Area. I think the most appropriate place to start is a little bit of background on the timeline. To explain to you how we got here. This did not just come out of thin air. In 2018, we began work on a master development plan with the Forest Service in conjunction with SE. This was signed in 2019. And essentially, if you haven't enjoyed a master development plan, it outlines everything that you think you would like to do in a projected timeline for about 15 years. So working with SE Group and the Forest Service, the town, we put everything we thought we wanted to do in terms of improvements to trails, to you name it, from trails, to decommissioning pieces we didn't like, all sorts of things. So we do a great number of studies, biology, wildlife, cultural heritage, the whole thing all goes into the master development plan. As a component of this, at some point in the process, my then contact at the Forest Service, Sam Maspin, said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we did a hut out here? And it's great because I had kind of been thinking the same thing. I'm a big fan of huts, as is Sam with the Forest Service. And so working with SE Group, they said, not a problem, it's just important that we put it in the master development plan. If you have something in a master development plan, gives you the ability to do it. It doesn't say you have to do it, but within this plan, we said we're going to do 17 miles of multi-use summer trails. We're going to expand into the Nordic trails, and we're possibly going to do a hut, yurt, or structure in a specific area of the peninsula. The peninsula was divided into 3 different zones in terms of the level of experience a visitor would have. Level 1 is highly disturbed, so right in near Slopeside and the Tubing. Zone 2 is you have some interaction with other people. You might see a snowmobile grooming, things like that. Zone 3 is the most natural, where you can see fewer people. Zone 2 is where the hut has to be. We identified a couple of potential places, and since then we really have narrowed it down to where we would very much like it to be. So that's the background of how we got here. That said, we had the past 7 years been working on all these improvements that the NDP said we should do. It was a few months ago, Sarah Straley, who's now our Forest Service Ranger, said, Summit Huts is looking for an additional place to do a hut. You should talk to them. Because, frankly, as a town and in my position, we are not looking to run a hotel. We're not a robust enough organization, nor do we necessarily want to build, maintain, handle all the bookings, handle all aspects of a hut. It's a big industry in Colorado. There's a number of huts, and Greg can answer any of your questions. So she made the introduction. Lindsay Joyce is also on the board of directors of Summit Huts. And since then, probably over the last 2 months, Greg and I've had multiple meetings. I met with their board. The Forest Service is deeply involved in terms of, let me jump to try and answer a couple of your initial questions. And then that's what this is. So I think this is just an update. We want to get your questions in terms of, what we know. The plan right now is the Forest Service will do a permit within So right now, the town, the Forest Service, we co-manage 500 acres of PRA with a ski area permit. What the Forest Service is proposing is it would carve out a couple of acre permit within that with Summit Huts to run their hut. We would have a separate agreement with Summit Huts as a concessionaire, collect revenue from people staying at the hut. Parking would be on town land. On the next slide here, it's going to be, we haven't quite determined what side of the gate it's going to be. We call this the boneyard. As you drive in Recreation Way on your right, you see those gates. It's where we store or dump our snow in the winter. CDOT uses it occasionally. So there's ample parking through the gate. There's also a very nice spot. We can do 3 sites in front of the gate with some very clear signage saying Summit, this would be the hut users only. You'll be towed in 5 minutes if you dare park here. But the idea is the town, we would be in charge of plowing and maintaining the parking, allowing access to the hut. People using the hut would be, it would include a trail pass. But logistically, where that upper arrow is, this is pretty close to the highest point of the peninsula, is where we would put the hut. The slopes away slightly to the south. We will include this, provided there are no objections, in our upcoming decision memo that we're going to do, because we're also ready to build the trails down in Iron Springs, which is the bottom right corner, which is the area now between the rec path and Highway 9. So all this would go together to the Forest Service with a big decision memo. That would, once that is signed, then we'll be allowed to move forward with the hut and this trail construction. So that's kind of the background. We probably should go. Do you want to add anything before we go into questions?
I can just say quick, like 2 minutes about Summit Huts. Some of you are familiar with Summit Huts and using the word hut kind of. I think if you've never been to one of our cabins, then you would really know what it's all about. A hut is really more about the ethos of how you use these structures. But we have 5 cabins here in Summit County, 3 of which we own and 2 of which we run in they're owned actually by the St. Isabel National Forest, and we operate those cabins. So our current cabins sleep anywhere from 12 to 20. But again, like back to that idea of the hut, it's the ethos of using it. So we don't have daily housekeeping and things like that in the cabin. It's really about self-reliance. It's about people doing into the cabins by their own power, and then cleaning the cabin and all of that. So Summit Huts has been in operation here in Summit County for about 35 years. But our first cabin, Janet's Cabin, which is off of Copper Mountain, and then our other cabins are south of here, south of Crackle. So that's just a quick little, Summit Huts blurb to frame some of.
How large would you propose this hut? How many people would it sleep? Would it be an overnight facility?
Yeah, overnight facility, we're talking about 8. That's kind of what we're kicking around in our initial conversations.
And why here? Because most of the huts is people go skiing. So they're hiking and they're remote. This is probably would be your easiest access hut, but there's really no skiing. Cross country. Cross country, but there's, most people go to Janet's, they're skiing the Bass, Charlie's Cabin, Independence Pass, they're skiing. There's really not much skiing here. Yeah. So why here? Why not like Miners Creek way up Miners Creek, wherever? Yeah. We just refurbished that one.
Well, I think we should probably both answer that question, right? Because, Pete approached Summit Huts about this opportunity. From our perspective, from Summit Huts, we're always looking for opportunities to what we have. And the White River National Forest, as you know, is the busiest national forest in the nation. And so coming up with possibilities for new cabins are few and far between. I told Pete when he first read, I'm like, whoa, we don't get calls like this every day. That the possibility exists. So that's really actually maybe like the initial impetus, like, well, wow, it's just an opportunity. But then secondarily, one of the big parts of our mission at Summit Huts is How can we increase access to the backcountry? How can we expose new people to backcountry experiences? And so Francie's Cabin is currently, it's the most popular cabin in the state, and obviously in our system as well. And one of the big reasons for that is the access. It's a 2.2 mile approach, just under 1,000 feet of elevation gain. And so we have families going in there with school groups, accessing the cabin, and we get requests for like an easier cabin for that sort of intro into the backcountry, intro into that experience.
You still allow snowmobiles up there to the parking area, and then they have to be there, or no?
No,
Because when we could bring snowmobiles back.
okay, in Port Town, no, it's all strictly non-motorized access.
Yeah. I think you went up to the woods and, we're gonna park there, and stop there, and then all your.
The rest of the way, interesting, okay. We mapped this out, it was like 1.06 miles and about 185 feet of elevation. So that is like the most direct route. Yeah, so, a new user group to be able to get into these cabins, which for us, we think is exciting.
You can post hole your whole way there.
I think they are.
Yeah, there's 3 lots right across the street from Ski Cooper. They're all less than half a mile in, and they're particularly busy with families and those and snowshoes.
I would also add to that, wouldn't you rather have your next meeting at this hut?
Are you paying for it? Who's paying for that?
So I think this is a year-round hut.
Yeah.
Backcountry skiing, and I'm a big backcountry skier. This to me would be more, in the winter would be a Nordic hut. I can see, this is, the focus is really kind of, I don't want to say just families, but this is, and it's also a little bit of a concern with the Forest Service as well as some huts and myself, is we don't want this to turn into an Airbnb party hut. The layout needs to encourage, if we're thinking maybe it's a 2, and a 3 downstairs, upstairs big common area. Town council could have their retreats there. But this is 365 days a year. I mean, tonight the place will be booked. It's beautiful in the summer. It's an amazing location. I could see, for example, locally, the mountain bike team would love to go up there to rent it. The trail runners would like it. Any family that is looking for young families, a short, accessible hike, it's perfect. But definitely the focus will be on Nordic skiing, absolutely. But you can snowshoe up there, we don't care how you get there as long as it's powered.
I like the idea of the accessibility, it opens it up to people who would not be able to access sort of more backcountry skiing. The first thing I thought when I saw it, literally the first thing is a party hut. That's the first thing that came to my mind, because we all know that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that as a concern, because I mean, I think it's that going to be the party hut.
They can still drag their keg up behind them.
Yeah. And I don't know what the rules would be here, what does party hut really mean? I know what it would have meant to me when I was 23, but I don't know what it would mean right now, how that would be enforced. But to me, the access is really the most important thing. Is there going to be a barrier at all between people who are not renting the hut, as far as like your mountain bike, your hike?
It's just set back enough from the winter buzzsaw trail, and in the summer Excelsior single track, that there's still some old growth, and the new growth is growing quickly, but there would be strong signage saying private hut for by reservation only. If you would like to book this hut, here's your QR code. So kind of because a lot of Americans have no idea what hut is. So, but yes, there would be some strong signage.
So there is an attempt to give the renters some space.
It is a private hut. This isn't, and you still see that at Sisters. People just want to pop it and say kind of what's going on a little bit. But that's
yeah, we have signage in all of our cabins. This would be a similar. So the Forest Service calls it a hut envelope. They distinguish it's anywhere from 1 acre to almost 3 acres. That's in our cabins, and so we have signage kind of delineating the hut envelope for registered guests only.
And did you say what that envelope size was?
I know that it's been discussed, but I don't know.
Oh, we don't know.
Right. As Pete said, it would be a carve out of the peninsula. area for summer huts, and that's where we would designate that, you know, in our other cabins, we don't allow dogs within that hut, and we look at a or supervisor order, actually, if there's no dogs inside it, so that would be probably something we would actively like to do that as well, use snow for water in the winter, that's kind of the main reason. So, you know, signage is how we it's fairly, I would say it's successful.
This hut would be visible to the, from like, where though it's.
Just set back just
back in
enough,
there.
yeah.
I think this is amazing, not only for families, but also other user groups that wouldn't have these opportunities, whether it's disabilities or, you know, with, 1.8 miles or 1 mile, 1 mile and 185 feet. That is, you know, being able to bring, elderly folks or, folks who are sit skiers or adaptive skiers, can access this hut that would never have that experience elsewhere.
In terms of build quality, something that the Forest Service has some pretty high standards, what they want to see for sustainability. It's not something we could move the Excelsior hut up there and call that hut. This has to be top to bottom, very tight. So,
Who is building it? Who's buying it? Who's paying for it? So that's great.
if only this was an easy one.
It's not easy.
Solar or gas lanterns, light source.
Yeah, everything would be solar, with no, external, power source for users, right? So we don't have any outlets or anything on your cabinets. So we have a solar toilet system for that, composting toilets. You know, I mentioned snow melt for the winter. We probably would be looking at, putting in a cistern and hauling water in there for summer usage, not connecting to, an existing water source or.
Would be pretty easy. This is pretty close to the main PRA road or?
We looked at it's 4,000 feet if we went to do a trench.
I don't know, just in terms of bringing water in.
Water.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like vehicle access is available for the town or the PRA?
In the winter, you could access it with snowmobiles if you had to, but we don't.
We would need to in the winter, obviously, because you're using snow melt.
You know, it kind of, I don't like it. I'm willing to listen. It's the same thing when I went helicopter skiing in Chuck, on the ridge back there, and they dropped us off and I see snowmobile trails up there, you know, snowmobiles. Like here I am on a helicopter ski trail and they're dropping me off somewhere where snowmobiles could go, you know? This is, you know, it's, that area is nice and quiet out there. And now we're gonna have people out, you know, you got people cross-country skiing out there, enjoying just the nature. You know, we don't have much of that here in Frisco, flat land and stuff, you know. I just, you know, I know Hunter was big into getting a hut up there. That's probably where it started. But I don't know, I like the way it is out there. I like the quietness, you know, I like going out biking, and then when you're out there biking and you hear a big party going on, and, you know, it just takes away from my biking experience, you know, to give somebody else an experience, you know. So I don't like it.
Your concern really is how it will affect on the it's out there.
You know, just every day is quiet out there, and, you know, you're gonna have 8 to 10 people, and
I
you're
guess
gonna hear them all the time.
my question, Dan, is when was the last time you went for a ride on the peninsula and didn't see another person? Because every time I'm out there, it's a busy area.
It is a busy area.
Campgrounds, hunting boats.
Yes, it's busy.
So it's, I don't see that it would change that much.
You may
Any
That's
cabin,
my
yeah.
It's my concern.
This go.
You can say during the winter, it is a little more quiet back there, right? So, I get your point. I will say though, in the summer, there's a lot of noise.
I get your point. I just don't agree with you, but that's
No, it's not.
how it is. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a great amenity for this area, which, you know, is is a revenue generator for us somewhat. It's an amenity. The huts are awesome. I've been to many over the years. My kid in 4th grade went to Francie's Cabin, and that was great. It was a great experience for them, and it's awesome. So more power to you. I don't think the partiers are gonna be getting this up. It's a thing to go on a trip. You know, it's planning, it's everything else. It's not just like woohoo. It's not, they're not party places necessarily. They're party places because, you know, skiers and whoever else are
Well, this is
not
gonna
afraid
be,
to have a good time, but
this is gonna be a very basic, it's only a mile in. You can haul in a lot of stuff when you're dealing with other cabins that are 5 miles and 4 miles in. People are looking at like, do I really wanna carry that case of beer? No, I'm gonna do a lot.
And I think we've seen a tremendous growth in backcountry skiing. We have more users than ever right now in the backcountry. So I guess that would be a fair question. You know, there's no way to limit who registers to rent a hut, but what is the back end of, if there is a party at the hut, and you know, how do we hold users accountable?
I think there's a lot of questions still to be answered, because what you all are voicing is the exact concern, and like as soon as I brought it to my board, it was very similar to what we're talking about right here. We as a Summit Huts board love the idea of the accessibility, having bring more user groups in, have the same concerns that we're talking about. So, you know, things that we have kicked around initially, and I think we need to go much further, just you know, the architecture of the hut. How can we design it so that it's not as conducive for party? I don't know what that means, but those are things we're thinking about. And I think, you know, we needed to kind of update and modify our policies, be very clear in communication about the intention of this cabin. And then, you know, we have parties happening at Janet's Cabin, which is their most deep, you know.
That's where we party.
So, you know, it's and then, you know, most of those end up being just fine, right? They don't begin with their cabin, they clean up, they still follow, even though that happens, they still follow all of the expectations of being, you know, a cabin user. In the rare case, I think, you know, in my opinion, we've got 1 or 2. Actually, one that I can think of, we, you know, then contacted the trip leader and talked to them about what's going on, and not allowing them to.
I think
That's
not,
pretty extreme.
not designing it for council meetings, we could be the worst of it.
You know,
There's a that answer is not complete, right? Because I think we're still in phases of exploring all that, and it's not like our concerns are any less with what I just shared, right? We need to continue to talk about that stuff.
And I think a lot of that can just be a security deposit, words when you rent a hotel. Do you guys do that currently, or is it?
No, but that's could be something that we do.
You know, as easy as, okay, this is your security deposit, or we take a credit card, and don't charge that, you're good. But having that as an option.
And this was, you know, Adam with the Forest Service, his concerns, and some of the things we talked about is by design, if there's only 3 parking places, additional parking is either not available or very expensive. That's pretty simple. We talked about hut masters quarters, we're not gonna do that. But there are so many locals here that I think if we needed to, it could be a case of, you know, good news, you're gonna be checked in on by our hut master 2 hours after check-in. There are plenty of people here in Frisco that would love to ski out there for a free night to stay at a hut just to check in. And in most cases, it's a case of, hey, everything good? Guys, okay with the fire, you're in the stove, whatever. So there are a lot of subtle cues, especially we talked about with the marketing. If you pitch it as a little bit of a family-friendly hut, something we forget is, you know, as skiers, a lot of people like to go to huts just to read a book. It's beautiful. But we're not naive. There's a lot of little subtle cues we can do to try and get the type of user who's going to have the best experience out here.
Yeah, I think I just kind of look at the huts as being remote and, you know, not having somebody biking by you or cross-country skiing. You know, you're out there by yourself with your group. And you're not having all these users around you. You know, that's how I look at the hut system.
And that's what this hut is for. It's all for that backcountry experience.
I love
I
the
think-
idea. I think it'll be awesome. I think it's a really cool opportunity to educate people, to have like signs around the flags. And to just like introduce this world to people that might never even know what it's all about. And I think there's a lot you can do with design, just like setting up kind of like the vibe that you want people to have when you're there. I think that's definitely the real thing. So I'm all for it. I think it's awesome.
Sure you guys do in contemplating wildlife disturbance. I mean, it's not like the peninsula is, it's just a complete disturbance to wildlife anyway. But there is wildlife up there. You know, it's coyote, the fox, and
High school.
the birds. And
The wild.
so you guys.
Yeah. Wildlife days and surveys at all.
With 5 minutes over, Elizabeth, anything?
I would love to see how it progresses. Hear about this more.
I think you got clear, thank everyone for your input on both sides of the matter. I think you've got clear direction. I would say, not with this council, but since we hired Pete, we've been asking him for our government peninsula, and this was surprised when it came forward, so I'm very happy to see it come forward. With that, I can't, mention our other ask, which is a biathlon, of course.
It's just, honestly, it's just money, right? We can do it.
Right. To go for
And feel free to contact me if you've got questions, concerns. Let's talk about a hut. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
2027, we like that at the very earliest.
Yeah, good question.
Are you gonna give it a cool name?
Well, we would be, yeah, I mean, the naming of a hut is well, that's your question. It would be something that would, I think, I don't know if it would be approved by this, I don't know how it works, but naming rights for a cabin is a big revenue generator, right? So the family that donate the money, you know, that, I think we probably, conversations talk about, you know, make sure it's appropriate and what, but, you know, somehow to retain the right to name the cabin, I guess is what I should, to be straight.
Bristol Town Council.
Yeah.
That we didn't take.
That way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go to the back.
Thank you guys.
that, be up there and then we.
It's gonna fly.
I think I did.
Again, no one's stopping for the question, no matter where you put it. Totally. I promise.
You let me know when you're ready.
This one's on.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mic and recording.
Great, thanks, Stacy. With that, hi, everybody. It's a little after 7, and let's call to order the regular meeting of the Frisco Town Council for June 10th, 2025. Maybe have a roll call, please.
Here.
Here.
Ian.
Here.
Representative Adrian. Here. QB. Here. Goldstein. Here. And Ryan.
Here. Stacy, with that, we'll open it up to public comments. The public comments time is reserved for items that do not have a public hearing later on the agenda. If you plan to comment on an item that appears later on tonight's agenda, please wait until that item is announced and public comment is requested at that time. State your name and address for the record, be topic specific, and limit comments to 3 minutes or less. No council action is taken on public comments at council meetings. Council takes public comments under advisement, and if a council and/or staff response is deemed necessary or appropriate, the individual making the comment will receive a formal response from the town at a later date. It is recommended to sign in at the welcome table at each meeting if providing in-person comment, and include contact information for follow-up communication. And with that, do we have any public comment in chambers? Please.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. Sorry, I was not prepared to speak tonight, but I was at your meeting earlier and I just kind of stayed, and then I thought I'd provide you some public comments. So, and I do want to talk to, and Tom, please time me. I do want to talk to the covenant. Oh, 7:03. Okay, 3 minutes. Oh, whoops. I just want to say, you hear a lot from the people at the Pequon neighborhood, and I just want to have you have the voice of somebody that doesn't live in the Pequon neighborhood, but that lives in deed restricted housing, has lived in this town for a long time. And I think I just want to express the gratitude, number one, for the process that you're going through. I've seen in some of the comments that you're receiving that why are you even doing this anymore? You're not addressing the concerns of the Pequon neighborhood. I still think it's important to continue the process that you've started. I think it's important for us to periodically review these covenants that we opt into because they become outdated or things change or whatever. We need to revisit them. So I hope that you continue on the road that you've started and don't stop. I purchased my condo in Marina Park in 2008. I opted into the new covenant in 2019. And I see, I did that fully knowing what the language meant, but I do see some of the issues that have popped up with the reference to the chart that was meant for new construction and not for resales. So a couple things I just want to say is I appreciate where you've landed so far. I really appreciate that you're steering away from a resale calculation formula, especially one that's tied to the greater of. To us that have been working on this issue for a long time, we've established that is not best practice. That the greater of formulas are problematic over time. And I also want to say that I really support resales via lotteries. I do think that that's the most fair way to do resales. When I'm listening to some of the comments that I've heard here in the chambers and also emails that have been submitted to you guys, I have some disconnect with some of those sentiments that people are putting out there. People talk about replacing boilers. Somebody put in a comment that your charge is to provide current homeowners the appropriate financial incentive to invest in their homes. And in parentheses, that's a quote, is new roofs, siding, heating systems, and paint. Those are all maintenance items. In my mind, I've had to pay for the exterior painting of my building, special assessment every 6 years. I've replaced my boiler, I've repaired it, and I don't think it's your charge to give me a financial investment incentive to do that when that's really just maintenance and what you have to do as a homeowner, whether it's deed restricted units or not. So I think when you're purchasing a deed restricted home in Frisco, at least I wasn't going into it to build wealth. You're not paying rent, you are building equity, all of that is good. You are buying into housing stability. you're buying into subsidized affordability and the ability to live in this town. So,
I'd like.
3
to
minutes.
hear
Damn, that was
another minute
good.
if we could.
That's fine.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit more. You don't like that? That's it? Okay.
Yeah, I thought she was.
Thank you.
Good time.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Any other public comment in chambers? Any public comment online?
Yes, we have Alex Beach. Can you just give him a moment to?
Sure.
Alex, you can go ahead.
Hello. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yep,
Can you hear me in chamber?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I can't hear you guys, so I apologize if you can't hear me. I've stepped aside and I'm at a show at the Mission Ballroom tonight, but fighting your housing policy in Frisco is a job that never sleeps, so I have to make sure I call in. First, I want to say I'm glad to see, I think that was Lena, I couldn't be entirely sure, online, show up and speak. It's great to see some other people in town come out and talk about housing policy. I know I've been the only person at a lot of these meetings, and I really think regardless of, whether we agree or not, it's really important that the council lets the people weigh in more on this process because the housing policy in this town affects us all so intimately. So you really should include the people more in this process. And the one thing I wanted to bring up tonight, and I spoke with Councilmember Held the other day, so if I run out of time, he can elaborate with you a little bit. But I feel like one issue with the new covenant, and I apologize, I wasn't able to watch the work session, so I'm not sure if you already covered it. But one of the issues that you're trying to address is mobility and like having people be able to get in, get out, make a little bit of equity and move on. So there's a little turnover in that neighborhood. Irregardless of whatever resale calculation or all these other variables that we're debating, the issue I want to bring up tonight is the lottery as the sole way of allocating housing. I feel like as somebody who's lost almost 100 lotteries in the last decade up here, if we push this new covenant through, people in Peak One might make a little bit more money on their resale. They might have a little bit more equity. But if the only way they're going to be able to buy another house is through the lottery, they're going up one against 300, 400 people, they're not going to get it. And so I feel like you're going to create stickiness. You're not going to get the intended impact of having that mobility in the housing, and people are still going to be stuck. So irregardless of everything else, I want you to think about that point. And thank you guys for letting me call in tonight.
Thanks, Alex.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Beach. Any other public comment online?
Just give a couple of moments here.
Sure.
If you're online and you'd like to give public comment, just raise your hand in Zoom. Not seeing anything.
Got it. Thanks, Stacy. With no further public comment online and none in chambers, we will close public comment and we'll move on to any council or mayor comments. Any comments, people?
Parklets went out today. Woohoo, that's exciting for me. I like the parklets personally.
Cool.
Rode my bike here today and saw people already sitting on them and enjoying them. So good things.
Cleanup day was nice. Nice day.
Yep, it sure was.
12:10, we were out of burritos.
Yep.
Wow. I
Yeah.
heard a lot about that. I think we should go back to barbecue. One of these times.
Cool.
Go back to barbecue and, but that's my personal opinion. I didn't get a burrito.
I can tell.
A lot of people didn't. I heard a lot about it.
Got it.
I just wanted to thank staff for the awesome housing retreat we had last week. And it was super well put together, informative, and appreciate you guys doing all that work.
Great. Anyone else? I'll thank the staff for the kids programs that have all just opened up, and we got the summer in full motion now out at the PRA. And thanks, and there'll be plenty of stuff going on over at the marina, as I'm sure as well. With that, I'll close council and mayor comments and move on any staff updates, Tom.
Got a few. First, I want to, to echo some of the things that that the council was saying. Our crews at the marina, the adventure park, Public Works have really been working hard to get summer started for us. It's not just temperature and amount of light during the day. Obviously, parklets went out. Our planters are out, ready to receive flowers. You know, a big effort of all of our staff, the deck at the marina, everything that goes on with our biking facilities and skateboard facilities out at the PRA and the kids programs. They're doing a great job of providing services to our community and our visitors. And it's just the beginning of the summer. With that, Rock the Dock on Thursday, 5 to 8:30. Heartburn and Diggin' Dirt will be the bands. We'll have some food trucks out there. The Island Grill will be serving drinks. So fun for all. And I plan on being there right at 5 o'clock. So we'll enjoy that. I handed out to the council some information that you can use around this topic. We are Magellan Strategies will be issuing the survey, our voter survey, to talk about town services, capital priorities, and a possible tax question related to town services and capital priorities. So the text went out to voters today, as well as the press release for that. So if anybody has any questions that you want to direct at staff, certainly get that to us, and we can provide some explanation of that, but you've got the information to do that as well. And then the last thing came out of Katie at our leadership meeting this week. We had an interesting situation based on one of our planning commission agendas that it seems like it got data mined and is being used to scam people, applicants. And so we've only seen one situation of it, but just be aware if people are asking you about, hey, the town is contacting me about extra permit fees that I have to pay, have them contact us first, because it's probably not true. Now, who thought they'd come after planning commission agendas and town council agendas, but it must be lucrative enough to do it. So that's all I've got today.
Got it. Thanks, Tom. With that, we'll close staff updates and move on to the consent agenda. I'm not aware of any changes to the consent agenda, although the agenda for the meeting has been updated. We have one new business item that we've added yesterday. So with that, does anyone have any discussion or comments or a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please call the question. Yes.
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 Like Adrian?
Yes.
And Ryan?
Yes.
Thank you, Stacy. With that, we'll keep it moving into new business. We have one item on new business this evening. It's agenda item number 1, first reading of ordinance 25-10, approving an amendment and a restated assignment and subordination of construction contract in connection with a loan from the town approved for the development of an affordable housing project at 602 Galena Street, pursuant to the Second Amendment and restated development agreement between the town of Frisco and the Frisco Community Housing Development Authority, the NHP Foundation, and the NHPF Galena LLC. And with that, I believe we're going to hear from Thad.
I think you probably will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council will recall that over the last two meetings, it had 2 readings of ordinance, I believe it was 2508, that had approved amendments to 3 of the loan documents that had previously been approved by the town in connection with the development agreement for the affordable housing project at 602 Galena. You may recall that ordinance 2508 had started at first reading in anticipation that there would ultimately be 4 documents approved. We were only able to get 3 through the final version in time for that final reading. So this is the follow-up ordinance. This is the 4th document. It is another one of the I guess I would say adjunct agreements to the loan agreement that the town had approved forms of, that NHP and the town had entered into. Once you get a few more parties involved in this, like your construction contractor himself and your bond financiers and the like, they tend to have comments on these agreements, and they did, and that's why it is back for amendment this time. There is a copy attached to your agreement. I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but it is essentially a document that is protective to the town and under certain circumstances will allow the town to step into the shoes of NHP and take the benefit of the construction contract. This agreement will hopefully never come to anything. No one will ever read it again or act under it, because if we are, we're having other worse days. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Thad? No questions for Thad. With that, we'll go out to any public comment. Any public comment on this agenda item in chambers? Any online?
Any, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Stacy. With that, we'll close up. Neil?
Well, I just really would like to thank the council and the staff for getting this project, which really will be the first new construction middle income 501c3 bond in the country done. So it's not only, you know, your largest and first $8 million investment, it is a national first, and it's also a first time NHP has used its S&P rating to enhance a bond. So this has been phenomenally complex, done under extreme time pressure so that we can build before the snow. That's put pressure on a lot of folks in the town. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for everything that everyone has done. This is going to be a great project and a great legacy for the council and the town. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Neil.
Any other public comment? No further online?
Mr. Mayor.
Great, we'll close public comment and we'll come back to council for any further discussion. And I will echo a little bit of what Neil is referencing, in that in the last few weeks, I've had the opportunity to interact with folks from across the state. And I can tell you that the MEHOB board and the folks down at the Capitol are very happy that that Frisco specifically was able to attain this. It could have gone to anyone, but due to our location to Denver and the number of folks we'll have traveling through here and our specific housing needs, I feel as though it landed in the right place for the right utilization of the process. So thanks to Neil and the team and our staff for getting it all put together. And any other questions or comments? And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the first reading of ordinance 25-10.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the first reading of ordinance 25-10. Stacy, please call the question.
Yes. Inkin.
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Hibby.
Yes.
Goldstein. Held.
Yes.
Kripsek Adrian. Yes.
Great. We're done with new business. Let's move on to old business, our last item of the evening. My back is killing me in case anyone cares. This is agenda item number 2, second reading of ordinance 25-09, amending chapter 180 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco concerning the Unified Development Code by amending section 180-6.19 regarding drive-through signs and amending section 180-6.19.11.b. master sign plan application requirements. Wow. And with that, I think we're going to hear from Katie.
Usually, second readings, we just remind you that you approved the first reading. I'll remind you there was a lot of discussion over this item. And just ask if you want me to pull up a presentation or if you have questions or how you want to run the second reading.
Thanks for asking. Anyone have any further need for any more visual aids or explanation from staff?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. No.
Okay. Let
Thanks,
me know if
Kate.
you have questions.
You got it. Thanks, Kate. With that, I did have an opportunity to view the other meeting that I missed. So I was aware of the robust discussion around this topic. Does anyone have any comments that they'd like to make on this topic before we keep moving?
I just want to acknowledge the public comment that we received about this topic, and how it will impact those folks. I think there are a lot of really good points regarding why are we changing code for one specific business. I know that's not exactly what we are saying we're doing, but the reason that we've brought this as a topic is because it would benefit one business. Just want to highlight that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Follow up?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I did want to let you know, I spoke with the manager about this after the last meeting. And because that was not the first time that the council has had a conversation about limiting, what for lack of a better word, I'll call formula businesses within certain districts of the town, or limiting drive-throughs or businesses that use drive-throughs within certain districts of the town. I have asked an associate to do a little bit of follow-up research to some research that I've done previously. Just as a highlight to all of that, and you may recall some previous discussion on these lines, because this is not the first time the council said the conversation. There may be some legal difficulties and impediments in limiting what we might refer to as chains. There may not be legal difficulties or impediments limiting businesses in certain districts based upon their physical impacts, like the use of drive-throughs. I will leave it at that for now, but just wanted to let you know, as a result of that conversation, I decided we needed to prepare something a little more formal so that all of the council can have information about what are the limitations of the town's, authorities when it comes to picking and choosing types of businesses as opposed to business impacts. So, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
That's good clarification. Thank you. Follow-up questions for that or other comments?
I would just say that although at this point I'm for moving forward with this change, I think the constituency out in that area, Robin's neighbors, I think their concerns are very important and worth noting. And if we would like to talk about it more right now, I'm open for further discussion on this. So Robin, I just want to say, I don't think, I don't want you to feel that the second reading is just a blow by any concerns you or your constituency out there might have if we want to open it up again. And because we got Rick here this time too.
Yeah, we got time.
Anyone?
I would say, do we have to consider, as the town, that if somebody purchases a piece of property and they want to move in a business that meets code and zoning relatively, then it's their prerogative to do so, and it's incumbent upon us to facilitate that, as opposed to be a stopgap or inhibit their ability. Adding the other drive-through in this particular business, I think just really applies to managing traffic in that area, which is going to be impacted by exit 203 for 2 years or so, starting later in the summer. And that's why I chose to go along with this. I'm not in favor of this particular business. I would choose a different business if I got to choose that, but we don't get to choose that. It seems to be the right thing to do.
I just want to point out that nobody from McDonald's has showed up to our meetings. Nobody has written to us. They aren't asking for it. Or at least not that
Staff initiated this, and we are not involving McDonald's in our code amendment, and we have not invited them to they can come, but we have not sharing the information with them because it is not a McDonald's code amendment.
Mhm.
So they haven't actually been invited by staff and told about these meetings. So
With that, this doesn't seem to be of importance to them. Whether or not they have too many boards.
I think it is important to them that they want more boards. But I think your point that their absence here, the issue, the vote is important, is what you're saying.
And there is engagement from the public who it would impact. You know, I walk by there almost every day and I could see how 4 sets of headlights shining into somebody's room could be a little unpleasant.
Which way is well, I guess we're just looking at an ordinance. We're not looking at which way the lights are going, which way they're coming in and which way.
Signage. in the
Huh?
code. You're looking at the signs in the code, including the master sign plan changes and allowing more drive-through signage on a property is what you're looking at.
As this property has not sold yet, right?
I do not.
Or is the property for sale? Or is the current owner just going to develop this? Do we know?
Well, I do know that they're trying to sell it. I don't know if it's been purchased or not.
Any other discussion or thoughts?
It's also important to recognize the impacts that this could have outside of this one particular business. There are several chain restaurants, there are several banks that may or may not continue to be in operation that all have the capacity for this. So if that's something that we want to have on Summit Boulevard, then that's what we're doing right here. If it's something we want to prevent, now's the time.
Well, to clarify, there is nothing in our code. If you don't approve this ordinance, there's nothing in our code that prevents that business or any other business from running 2 drive-through lanes. It is simply their desire to have 2 signs for each drive-through lane that has provided them an impediment. I've been through, I'm sure we've all been through fast food double drive-through lanes, some of which have 2 signs per lane and some of which have 1. But my point is, if you're trying to get at the prevention of double drive-through lanes, you need more code amendments than this, because this will not stop that. It may inhibit it, but it will not prohibit it.
And I would like to add that it did open the avenue to discuss potentially prohibiting drive-throughs on Main Street.
Yep.
Yeah, that area is zoned for this purpose, this use. We're not gonna change that. We're not gonna be able to change that.
You could change it for future operation.
We could attempt to change it for future, but the fact is, this is the industrial commercial zone. And if you wanted to change it, you could try.
Yeah.
Because the thing is there's already existing businesses that fall under that zoning.
That's not gonna change.
Yeah, classification, and that's definitely not gonna change. So I would venture to say you basically can't change that here in this position.
Just to clarify, sorry. I did get an answer from a helpful staff member who looked at county property records. McDonald's now owns the property that you're discussing.
Oh, that was quick. Thanks.
Go. The breaking news.
Got it. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve second reading of ordinance 2509.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 2509. Please call the question.
Adrian?
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Inkin,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Kibbe,
Nope.
Goldstein,
No.
Held.
Yes.
Got it with that. Thank you, Stacy. That motion will pass, and with that, we have no other further business this evening. Thanks, Katie. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved, we are adjourned.
At 7:30.
Thanks, everybody.
At 7:30.
So moved.
Yes.
So moved.